Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us, who are members of the Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that, setting aside private interest, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give the glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the Vice President.
Honorable Senators, leave of absence has been granted to Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown and Senator Anthony Vera, both of whom are out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency the President, Paula May Weeks, ORTT. By Her Excellency, Paula May Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Ms. Yokima Bethelme, whereas Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, do hereby appoint you, Yokima Bethelme, to be a member of the Senate temporarily with effect from the 6th of June 2022 and continuing during the absence of Senator the Honorable Dr. Amory Brown from Trinidad and Tobago, given under my hand and seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 2nd day of June 2022. To Mr. Josh Drayton, whereas Senator Anthony Vera is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Josh Drayton, to be a member of the Senate temporarily with effect from the 7th of June 2022 and continuing during the absence of Senator Anthony Vera from Trinidad and Tobago, given under my hand and seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 6th day of June 2022. Senators are about to take oath.
I, Yokima Barthelemy, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, upon which I'm about to enter.
I, Josh Drayton, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities of the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I'm about to enter.
From the House of Representatives, petitions, papers.
Acting Leader, Government of Government.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Public Utilities. The annual report and financial statements of the Regulated Industries Commission for the year ended December 31st, 2016. Thank you.
On notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Much, Mr. Vice President, the government is in a position to answer all three oral questions on the order paper today, and the written question is already in circulation. Thank you.
Senator Wiedmer.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Question number 96 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, while the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries is responsible for paddy costs owned to rice farmers, these payments are directly made by the national flour mills. In February 2022, the national flour mills met with affected farmers and efficiently addressed issues related to delays in payment. At this meeting, a decision was taken to make all payments for paddy costs to farmers within 30 days of receipt of invoices. Mr. Vice President, I am pleased to inform this Honorable House that currently National Flour Mills has held up its commitment to the farmers and no outstanding balances for paddy costs currently exist.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, Minister.
Senator Mark, question 97.
Yeah, question number 97 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of Security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, according to information received from the Commissioner of Police, the operations of the firearms section of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service were suspended in September 2021 as a result of an audit and criminal investigation being conducted by the Financial Investigation Branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Criminal Investigations Department of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the Professional Standards Bureau, which looks after internal serious allegations of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Mr. Vice President. Notwithstanding this, on completion of some aspects of these inquiries, the supplemental section of the unit was reopened for business in February 2022. In this regard, applications for firearm users' employee certificates that do not fall within the area of suspicious transactions are currently being reviewed for prompt processing. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Mark.
Could the Minister indicate to this Honorable Senate whether he's aware that the inability of trained security officers to obtain firearm users' employee certificates is in fact having a very negative impact on their ability and their organization's ability to provide top-class security service to their clients? Can the Minister indicate whether he's aware of this particular reality?
Minister of National Security.
The Vice President, the grant and processing of those grants of firearm users' licenses and all the other permits and licenses within the ambit of the Firearms Act of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Vice President, do have economic and financial implications. But the audit of which I spoke was absolutely necessary, as a tremendous amount of suspicious financial activity surrounded it. And as a consequence, it became necessary to implement the audit and the series of investigations that I have properly and truthfully described. And that was necessary, Mr. Vice President. And notwithstanding the inconvenience or inconveniences that such suspension might have caused, the bigger picture of dealing with the possibility of crime and criminality in respect of the firearms regime required and continues to require the attention of law enforcement and is of concern to all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Senator Mark.
The Minister, through you, whether he can indicate to this Honorable Senate any time frame whatsoever for addressing what can be described as the backlog of firearm users, employees certificate. When will that, Mr. Vice President, be addressed, the backlog?
Senator Mark, based on the first answer given, I will not allow that question.
Mr. Vice President, is the Minister aware that MTS, a very important state entity and agency, is suffering enormously as a result of this setback? And in those circumstances, can the Minister indicate to MTS and to other agencies, some kind of...
Senator Mark, that question was answered in your first supplemental. You are now on your last supplemental.
Well, may I go on to my next question, sir? I'll go on to the next question. Question number 100 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Acting Leader, Government of Business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the Water and Sewerage Authority has advised that the repairs to the Beetham Gardens sewer pipeline project, which entailed the rerouting of 626 feet of 44 inches ductile iron pipe along Main Street and CCC Boulevard, together with the installation of 3 manholes, 19 feet, 21 feet, and 26 feet in depth, respectively, were implemented over a 6-month period from October 15th, 2021 to April 10th, 2022. The cost incurred for the repairs, inclusive of road restoration, was $14,435,638.90, broken down as follows. Rental of heavy equipment, including excavators, backhoes, dump trucks, hired cranes, trash pumps, water trucks, $7,720,024.11. Labor cost for employees, 3 shifts working 24/7 for 120 days, $3,710,558.79. Materials, including materials for restoration of road and pavement on Main Street and CCC Boulevard, rebuild drain on CCC Boulevard and Main Street, replacement of fence and gate at Beetham Gardens Primary School, excavate and mobilize approximately 85,000 cubic feet of river wash for backfill, replace sewer connections for Beetham Gardens Primary School, HDC pensioners' quarters and Anglican Church, and repairs to CCC wall and adjoining drain on the eastern side, $455,056, and miscellaneous consisted mainly of wages paid to workers employed on the project from the Beetham community, $550,000. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
Mr. Vice President, I don't know if the Minister is in a position to indicate to the Senate, as it relates to rentals amounting to $7 million, inclusive of heavy equipment, whether the Minister is in a position to share with the Senate the agencies or companies or organizations that were involved in this particular exercise that amounted to the $7 million?
Senator Mark. Senator Mark, the question was fully answered as to the breakdown of the $14.1 million.
Yes, I know it was answered, but I was just asking whether the Minister could share with us any information on this matter of the rentals.
Senator Mark, that question does not arise.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm guided. Thank you.
Public business, government business, bill second reading.
Honorable Senators, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, May 31st, 2022, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Municipal Corporations Act, Chapter 2404, the Burial Grounds Act, Chapter 3050, the Cremation Act, Chapter 3051, the Advertisements Regulation Act, Chapter 3053, the Recreation Grounds and Pastures Act, Chapter 4101, the Highways Act, Chapter 4801, the Dogs Act, Chapter 6754, the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604, and the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, Number 10 of 2014. Honorable members, we have had 9 speakers thus far, including the mover of the motion of this bill. Any members wishing to join the debate may do so at this time. Senator Seepersad.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the debate on the bill, the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020. It's been already established that local government falls under the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, which functions as a coordinating agency who guides and assists municipal corporations in the provision of community services such as infrastructure development, disaster management, and public health and sanitation. The Municipal Corporations Act 21 of 1990, proclaimed in 1991, replaced the county council system with 14 municipal corporations. That is, 2 city corporations, 3 borough corporations, and 9 regional corporations. Local government in Tobago is governed by the Tobago House of Assembly Act. Therefore, the last time the major reform was done to the structure and functions of local government was 32 years ago. The Local Government Reform Bill 2020 seeks to standardize the distributed system of local government and provide for more self-financing and stricter governance as generally obtained in modern business enterprises. While standardization lends itself to simplification of what is now local government business units, the municipalities and services required by these organizations are by and large discrete. The sizes, demographics, and needs of municipal corporations are very different, and in this case, one cap does not and cannot fit all. The municipal and executive councils of these restructured organizations will therefore require adequate expertise and autonomy and be flexible and agile as any modern business unit in providing the community services under its remit. While the Minister for Rural Development and Local Government continues to exercise overarching oversight of the municipal corporations, demonstrated performance, accountability, responsibility, and transparency in the past are woeful, to say the least. Change management in organizations takes time, and are seldom successful if all players are not on board and change management expertise and help are absent. Proclamation of the Act, therefore, must be followed by a well-defined and crafted implementation plan. However, of critical importance is the acceptance by those elected, recruited, and appointed to manage the needs of communities in an efficient and timely manner while ensuring the public's purse is put to good use and not abused. Mr. Vice President, so far a modern, efficient, and properly resourced local government system continues to be an elusive goal. The corporations cannot deliver services to the public in an efficient, timely, and cost-effective manner. The major impediments include inadequate funding, an inefficient administrative structure that is clogged with bureaucracy, low employee productivity, and a lack of any real financial accountability and corporate governance. While local government is the lowest tier of public administration, its importance cannot be underestimated, since it delivers services not only at the grassroots level, but to the entire community which it serves. These services are of critical importance for national development. The bill proposes legislative amendments for local government administration. The amendments largely relate to internal reorganization and streamlining of the management structure of municipal corporations. Sections 11, 12, 17, 21, 22, 24, 25, 27, 31, 33, and 34, with some transfer of authority to the Chief Executive Officer, Section 38. Councillors and aldermen will no longer be part-time, but will be appointed to full-time positions and compensated accordingly, Section 17. In clauses 35A to 35J, the responsibility of all corporations are now expanded to include finance, planning, and allocation of resources, corporate resources, including human resources, registry and records management, internal audit, sport and youth development, recreation grounds and public spaces, public health, sanitation and environment, community development and social services, municipal police, disaster management, spatial planning and building inspection, infrastructure development and management. Mr. Vice President, this bill's most substantial element of change and emphasis relate to property taxes. Under the old land and building taxes system, approximately $200 million were collected annually. This paltry amount is because of inefficiencies in the system, including low property valuations, annual rateable values dating back in some instances to the 1950s, and households are not included in the valuation rule. In Part 5, Sections 76 to 81 of the bill deals with property tax. The municipal corporations will collect and retain all property taxes for residential properties within its municipality. The funds will not be passed to the Board of Inland Revenue, as was the case with the land and building taxes. It is estimated that $500 million will be collected annually from residential property owners across all regions. In reviewing the residential population data for the various regions, I found that some areas such as Point Fortin, Port of Spain, and San Fernando have significantly lower residential populations than areas such as Couva, Tabaquite, Talparo, and Tunapuna, Piarco. Therefore, until the commercial and industrial property taxes are implemented, the government needs to ensure that the areas with lower residential populations are adequately funded so that they can fill their expanded mandates. Other relevant sections relating to financial accountability and governance include Section 109, Annual Estimates, and Corporation Fund and Collection of Fees, Rates, and Taxes. All receipts, earnings, and accruals of the Corporation Fund will not be paid into the Consolidated Fund, but will be retained for the purposes of the Corporation Fund. Accounts and Audits of the Corporation, Section 113. This section deals with external audits and the appointment of external auditor. Mr. Vice President, currently the financial accountability of municipal corporations is not satisfactory. 93% of the corporations have not submitted audited financial statements to the Parliament for more than 5 years. The statistics are as follows. Point Fortin Regional Corporation, 2000 to 2021, 22 years outstanding. Arima Borough Corporation, 2008 to 2021, 14 years outstanding. Couva, Tabaquite, Talparo, and Deo Martin Regional Corporations and the San Fernando City Corporation, 2009 to 2021, 13 years outstanding. Port of Spain Corporation, Mayaro, and Tunapuna Regional Corporations, 2010 to 2021, 12 years outstanding. Chaguanas Borough Corporation, Sandy Grande, and Siparia Regional Corporations, 2014 to 2021, 8 years outstanding. Pinal Debe Regional Corporation, 2015 to 2021, 7 years outstanding. San Juan Laventille Regional Corporation, 2016 to 2021, 6 years outstanding. And Princestown Regional Corporation, 2019 to 2021, 3 years outstanding. Mr. Vice President, this describes the woeful state of governance in the municipal corporations and accountability of those charged with managing public funds. This bill proposes to entrust these corporations with funds collected from property taxes with little real financial oversight. Given the statistics I've recounted before, the corporations have demonstrated that they are not accountable, and evidently there are no consequences. In my view, our system of governance cannot be relied on to hold anyone accountable for the use of public funds. To bring the provisions of this bill to life, the government must ensure that all corporations are adequately staffed and resourced. Pertinent and adequate policies and procedures must also be in place and strictly monitored and enforced by the Ministries of Finance and Rural Development and Local Government and other relevant authorities. Local government corporations must not only operate lawfully and ethically, but they need to work hard to avoid and ensure that even the appearance of impropriety is not apparent. Accountability should be a concern for all local government employees, not just those elected, and requires strict standards and procedures to promote ethical behavior. While the bill proposes increased penalties and fines for misdemeanor in public office, for example, sections 43, 121, 197, and 199, core values such as integrity, equality, and transparency must be the foundation for every decision and policy. I agree that many changes proposed in the bill, while late in coming, are necessary and can improve and enhance the services to communities. However, Mr. Vice President, I still have misgivings that without strict adherence to professionalism, responsibility, accountability, and transparency, good governance will be sacrificed, together with the essential services that the communities and Trinidad and Tobago require and need to be resilient, to develop and grow. Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senator Dillon-Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for allowing me to have a short presentation on this very, shall I say, earth-shattering, earthquake-type bill that is being placed before this Honorable House to bring forth significant changes to the way we govern ourselves in Trinidad and Tobago. I noted the Minister of Rural Government and Rural Development and Local Government, in his piloting of the bill, spoke about the number of years that Trinidad and Tobago has been grappling with these changes. Trinidad and Tobago, since 59 years of independence, its quest to secure meaningful local government reform, and that has persisted without much success. It is therefore a great privilege for me to see that the local government reform bill is at this stage in the Parliament. Like the singer Sam Cooke sang, it's been a long time in coming, and like him, there are many of us that hoarded hope that a change would come. Mr. Vice President, I noted with keen focus, I've been following the debate on the reception of the report of the Joint Select Committee on this matter, and also noted the contributions and concerns that were made within the minority report. I listened intently for proper answers, or the types of answers that the government would give to the very questions. I will be listening, not I have been, because they are in the Senate, the answers are still to be given, to the answers that will be given for the many concerns that have been expressed by the persons who have so far participated in this debate. For instance, Senator Seepersad's concern just now, just a while ago, about what would happen in terms of the finances is also one of my great concerns. With so much authority and autonomy being given to the local government over their own affairs, there must be proper management to go with it. The business of the people and their money and their quality of life is serious business, and the bill will affect all three. I must commend all who have contributed to the in-depth work that went into constructing the bill. However, there are three concerns that are still at the fore of my mind. I would start with the first, and that has to do, I was really concerned about the municipal medical section 43, section 42 of the bill that talked about the municipal medical officer, the municipal director of health. I was concerned about what would happen in this great now corporate body with autonomous functioning, and as it relates to what will happen in terms of healthcare. And I'm saying that because I noted what happened during the management of the COVID-19 pandemic, where it was very obvious to me that there were gaps between what was happening with the regional health authorities and their link with the Ministry of Health, particularly in terms of data gathering and bringing timely data to the Ministry of Health, so that for timely making of decisions. And with the regional health authorities now, with the regional corporations now having this great autonomy with a municipal medical officer, what would have been the interaction between that person working within in these 14 corporations, or those persons, those medical officers, what will be their interaction with the county medical officer, the chief medical officer of health? And I'm saying that because as it relates to zoonoses and other diseases, there must be a close connection. And I was really happy, I didn't see it before, but I only saw it recently, that there's sections 43 of the 42 and 43 of the bill does deal with that. And I'm saying it is very important. I say that too because within the Tobago House of Assembly Act, where you have the County Medical Officer of Health reporting to the Chief Medical Officer, we have had issues, particularly as it has related to diseases of public health concern, where the County Medical Officer of Health did not necessarily have to report to the Secretary of Health as it was at that point in time. So I am very happy to see that this bill has taken note of that and has put into place something for that. Mr. Vice President, the concern about the property tax, as already mentioned, and what would happen in terms of how the corporations are going to manage and deal with the spending of property tax. It is my hope that there would be systems put in place to ensure that the additional funding that will be given to the regional health authorities would end up in the execution of the functions of the authority and not just building big structures. I'm saying this because, again, I look at what has happened with the Ministry of Health in the regional health authorities, diversification into regional health authorities. You have many regional health authorities. There are 4 in Trinidad and 1 in Tobago. And each regional health authority is built up with a very great structure, which is what is going to happen here with the 14 municipalities. They will have their finance people, they will have their health people, they will have many persons and many departments in each of the regional corporations. And in order to carry out their functions, they will have to have persons who have the capacity and who are paid appropriately. So my understanding is that these 14 corporations is now you're going to have a big spending in terms of putting 14 structures in place to ensure that they carry out their duties. And Mr. Vice President, my main concern is where would the funding come to ensure that the roads are fixed, the drains are cleared, all the things that are necessary for the function of the corporation. Who is going to monitor this? I see most of the areas are going to be, well, they have to get their funding, and not just funding, but they report to the Minister of Finance. Is it going to be that the Minister of Finance or the Ministry of Finance is going to ensure that the structures that are put in are lean and effective in terms of managing the situation that they will have before them? I am concerned about these 14 corporate bodies now, which will be put into place with so much autonomy. How will they manage that and at the same time make sure that we are putting into practice, let's say, making sure that the burgesses of all these authorities get the service that they need? I am also concerned about the change management structure, and I noted that Senator Timal had a suggestion, and I also heard recently Senator Seepersad talking about the structure that will need to be put in place to ensure that there's proper transition from where we are now to something that is better. You see, because it's very easy to put very nice bills into place, Mr. Vice President, and we can do that very well. So you will have a nice structure here, and according to this bill, we will be having all these corporations with fancy structures doing lots of stuff. But when the rubber hits the road, what are we going to get? And I'm just suggesting that we ensure that what is put in place from the beginning tries to set up these authorities to make sure that they will work. And one of the things that needs to be done is making sure that they have the appropriate transition structure. Mr. Vice President, the third area I would mention of concern is that I do hear, I heard it from the Minister in piloting, and I heard it from several of the other members who would have spoken, and it is the comparison between the Tobago House of Assembly legislation and the Local Government Reform Bill. Mr. Vice President, I think I understand what is being said, but I would like to ensure that nobody goes away thinking that what is happening in terms of the regional corporations is the same as what has happened and what will happen in the future in terms of the Tobago House of Assembly legislation that is still to be, the debate is to be completed, and that act is to be proclaimed. I'm saying this because we are talking here about two different systems. It is Trinidad and Tobago, 2 islands, 1 nation. And the arrangement for Trinidad and Tobago right now is that Tobago will have its government, an island government. Yes, under Trinidad and Tobago, and that's not the same for the local governments. The local governments are all within Trinidad, and they'll be managing their areas, but they would not be the same as the House of Assembly. So I'm just putting that out there because I really don't think that it is the same, and that thinking is the same thinking that we would have had at the time when Tobago was considered a county, and we have moved away from that now. So while I understand what is being said, it is not the same. And I must remind us that the proposed THA bill envisions 2 islands working alongside each other, similar to the St. Kitts Nevis model, and not a subset system of a large universal system. Therefore, I do not accept wholeheartedly the comparison between Tobago House of Assembly legislation and the Local Government Reform Bill. Mr. Vice President, I am looking forward to the time when we will be going through the clauses of the bill, because I do think there are many things here that need to be addressed, and I would just like to say that I do support the concept of the changes that are needed for the local government to function efficiently, but I'm saying again that the concerns must be taken. I thank you very much.
Senator Deonarine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity to contribute to this miscellaneous local government reform bill before the House today. Mr. Vice President, I first of all want to commend the excellent work of the Joint Select Committee on this bill. It is evident that extensive work went into hammering out some of the critical issues that have pervaded local government in the past. You could see that many areas that cause local government on the whole to be underperforming was well thought out and informed by expert advice that builds on years and years of work. This is fundamental legislation before us today, and it is an achievement to reach at this point after decades of groundwork. The objective of this bill, Mr. Vice President, is to upgrade the system of governance within 14 regional corporations. How is this going to be done? It is going to be done by granting the municipal corporations more autonomy. How are they granted more autonomy? In multiple ways. In the way in which they manage finances, the way in which they conduct budgeting, the way in which they manage their general affairs with respect to the hiring and firing of staff, just to name a few. But, Mr. Vice President, with autonomy comes great responsibility. While this increased autonomy gives the municipal corporations the freedom to handle their affairs, accountability would hold them responsible for results and for actions that produce results. And in order to get these results, there must be elements of fiscal self-management embedded in the governance framework. Now, there has been a lot of discussion on the two involved role of the Minister of Finance. So let us look at how the Minister of Finance is involved as it spreads across various parts of the bill. The Minister of Finance considers the budget approved by the Municipal Council. He or she would approve the annual estimates and make any such amendments to the estimates as considers expedient. The municipal councils municipal corporations must have accounting frameworks as approved by the Minister of Finance. The organizational structure is approved by the Minister of Finance in conjunction with the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. The receipt of grants and technical assistance from international donors and international organizations are also approved by the Minister of Finance. The signatories for checks and vouchers, and also the approval of borrowing. Now, Mr. Vice President, I think this involvement is especially important. And let me explain clearly why. And Senator Seepersad did an excellent job at demonstrating how chronically flawed the financial management of regional corporations have been in the past. And since the track record of regional corporation, especially when it comes to the management of state funds represented in the timeliness of their financial accounts, their bookkeeping, their audited financial statements, many regional corporations fall short. Now, Senator Seepersad gave a timeline on the audited financial statements for the 14 regional corporations. What I have before me is a report on the Auditor General for these 14 municipal corporations and how timely they have been in laying in this Parliament their financial statements. 3 regional corporations are basically up to date. We have Chaguanas, Princeton, Mayaro, Rio Claro. With Chaguanas' latest auditor's report on the financial statement being 2020, Princeton 2019, and Mayaro, Rio Claro being 2019. Before I continue describing these statistics, let me just put on the record that I received assistance from the Parliamentary Library in confirming this information and receiving the documentation of this information. You have some regional corporations, Mr. Vice President, San Fernando, Diego Martin, Cuba Tabaqui Talparo, whose audited financial statements has been outstanding for some 11 years. The most extreme cases that I discovered were Arima Regional Corporation, where I just did not find any report, and also Arima Regional Corporation, the last was 2007, and Point Fortin, where no report was found. Now, when you look at let's go a little bit further. When you look at the Auditor General's report for 2021, there are multiple regional corporations that are in violation of Section 50 of the financial regulation, which states that every receiver of revenue shall keep a cash book in which all receipts and payments shall be entered without delay. The Auditor General's 2021 report indicated that many regional corporations do not keep cash books. And that is for millions of dollars that is being spent in recurrent expenditure and development under the development program. And when these cash books do exist in some instances, because there are regional corporations who have their cash books very well maintained, there are some of them that are not maintaining these cash books properly. And I am outlining this information, Mr. Vice President, because I am very sure that the government is aware of this, and hence the reason there are so many areas that the Minister of Finance is involved and is responsible for approving, especially when it comes to the financial management. And I think this was deliberate for the purpose of building capacity, with the hope of building capacity in these regional corporations for fiscal self-management when it comes to the development of budgets, when it comes to the approval of annual estimates, especially the development of accounting frameworks, and so on. Now, I've made this point in the past, especially when we had the mid-year review just recently passed in this House. There tends to be a normalcy, because this is not something that happens only within regional corporations. It is something that also happens at the state enterprise level. So there's this normalcy of not staying up to date with your audited financial statements within the public sector. And what this bill does, Mr. Vice President, is give more autonomy. And what I am saying is that we cannot be giving more autonomy to these regional corporations, especially giving them a critical revenue collection function, that is the collection of property taxes, and the necessary accountability mechanisms and respective penalties for violating such is not in place. So I wholeheartedly support Senator Richard's recommendation. There needs to be some sort of provision in the law where they are held accountable to a higher account, where audited financial statements and all other financial statements are concerned. So let me go to clause. Okay, so let me be careful how I'm referring this. Part 5 of the bill, clause 81, part AL, subsection AL. This clause amends section 108 of the Municipal Corporation Act, which provides for the council to prepare and submit to the Minister of Finance for approval annual estimates of A, capital expenditure and the financing thereof, B, an income and expenditure budget for the financial year commencing the 1st October. Now, when the increased amount of autonomy and knowledge that this first time that this decentralized system is going to be implemented across the board with multiple accounting frameworks, because each one of the municipal corporations would have their respective accounting frameworks that is going to be approved by the Minister of Finance. There's going to be 14 corporation funds, that is the fund in which property taxes, revenue collected from property taxes goes into, and no more than, I think it is 7 or 8 divisions, then I think this section needs to be further defined, because it is a lot of responsibility that these regional corporations must be accountable for. Now, so I am submitting that this section be further defined to include budgeted statement of financial position, budgeted cash flow statement, an operational budget, a capital budget, and a strategic plan for the period of 4 years, which includes statements of objectives, the nature and scope of activities to be undertaken, the justification for capital expenditure, which would account for performance targets and the various objectives that is being sought by the regional corporation. Now, I want to single out the strategic plan because mention is made of the finance division that is going to be established in the bill, the Finance Resource Allocation Division, I believe it is. They would assist with the strategic plans, but nowhere in the bill it is mentioned clearly who exactly does the strategic plan. And I think that needs to be further defined under the functions of the Executive Council, because I think it is hinted there under Part B of the functions of the Executive Council, but the wording is not precise and it's not clear. Mr. Vice President, there are some areas that I do not think it is justified for the Minister of Finance to be involved, and therefore perhaps it is my misunderstanding, and therefore I seek clarification. And these are two areas. One, the Minister of Finance, in consultation with the Chief Personnel Officer, determines the remuneration of the mayor, the alderman, and the councillors. That is the first area. And the second area deals with the Minister of Finance approves license to trade and invest and vendors and determines the license fees. Now, I'm not too sure why the Minister of Finance have to get involved in this, in the business of determining the wages and so on of the mayor, aldermen, and councillors. Yeah, I don't know if it is for the sake of standardization across all regional corporations. It's not clear. So I think it needs to be, if that is the reason why the Minister of Finance has to be involved, because he is the one who would have information across all regional corporations on the amount of the on the value of funds in the corporation fund, which is the fund in which these persons would be paid from. I am not too sure if that is the reason. It's not clear. I seek clarification, Mr. Vice President. Continuing on Part 5 of the bill, the amendment to Section 7 of the Municipal Corporations Act, the Board of Inland Revenue to forward taxpayer information to each municipal corporation, the names, addresses, and assessed taxes of all taxpayer information for residential land. Now, I ask a question. Why can't we be specific to whom in the municipal corporation this information is being sent to? Because later down in the bill, it indicates, the bill demonstrates that, you know, well, the regional corporation, all staff in the regional corporation shall keep this information confidential. But why in the first place all staff is open to receive this information? Shouldn't it be restricted to only certain levels of authority within the regional corporation? Because I do not see what business the Monitoring and Evaluation Division, the Public Health and Sanitation Division, for example, what business they have with accessing taxpayer information. I don't see the reason for which they would have to access taxpayer information, because this is specific taxpayer information, names, addresses, their previously assessed taxes. This is very confidential information. Regardless of that, regardless there being a clause saying that, oh yes, well, everybody needs to sign on an oath of secrecy and whatnot. I think the bill should be specific to whom this information is being revealed to or provided to. And I suggest that this responsibility goes to the municipal council, the executive council, and the division responsible for finance, planning, and allocation of resources. Moving on to the amendment to Section 78 of the bill, of the Municipal Corporations Act, to collect property tax within the municipality, which shall be retained in a corporation fund of the municipal corporation. So I established that already. We are going to have 14 separate corporation funds. My point here, my comment here is that this is going to be administratively very expensive. Now, let me stick a pin here, Mr. Vice President. I say this is going to be very administratively expensive because I am hoping that the intention is not to have these 14 corporation funds be operating in silos. And if they are to not operate in silos, tax administration systems must be integrated with the Board of Inland Revenue and the Ministry of Finance. In addition, each regional corporation would now need to have a budget and financial management system implemented. If this is not done when operationalized, it is very possible that the deficiencies in local government may very well get worse than what it is right now before you see any sort of improvement take place. Because you cannot have these 14 regional corporations operating in silos. I too, like previous speakers, Mr. Vice President, like the recommendation coming out of the draft policy with respect to revenue generated from property tax and have it be collected in a pool and appropriate formulas derived to redistribute the funds based on a commercial and industrial index. I would have also preferred that a fund be established for the maintenance of schools. This is separate from the corporation fund because everything goes into the corporation fund, and from there you dip into there to do everything that falls under the roles and the functions of the regional corporations. Now, without this index, without this index, because the bill before us does not bring forth this index in which the property taxes collected will be redistributed. And in the absence of that, then I think what should have been in this bill is a clear formula to guide the Minister of Finance to determine its allocation from central government to the regional corporations. Because right now I'm not too sure what is the criteria or formula that is used to allocate funds, government funds, to the regional corporations. And I say this because you have areas with significantly lower population densities, and Senator Seepersad made mention of this point as well. The number of households and the lower population densities means that the number of households that will contribute to the residential property taxes, for example, in areas like Point Fortin, Mayaro, Rio Claro, Sangre Grande, to name a few, it will be lower, the amount of revenues collected. And automatically means that it would have lower amounts of funds for investments and development in the regional corporations, unless there is something fixed within the bill that says that, well, the Minister of Finance will come in according to a formula and supplement so that no level of inequality would exist across regional corporations. So the implementation of the property tax will certainly assist in cash flow. Let me stick up in here. Now, this bill, I am speaking about the implementation of the property tax, not the whole matter of whether we should have the property tax or not, because my thoughts on that I would reserve for another time. But the implementation of the property tax will certainly assist in the cash flow for different regional corporations. And as I said, there would be some regional corporations that would be chronically may very well continue to be underfunded. It is not as simple as saying, because I listened to the debate in the House of Representatives, as we commonly refer to as the other place, and I heard the Minister of Finance indicate that there is an estimate of around $400 million to be collected from property tax initially. And it is not as simple as saying that, well, we estimate $400 million to be collected from property tax and then have it evenly distributed across regional corporations. Because when you look at the population densities, as Senator Seepersad would have indicated, and you allocate, and I looked at the data from the 2011 census, which gave information on the number of dwelling units in each regional corporation. And according to that data, you have areas such as Mayaro Rio Claro that the number of dwelling units is 3%, accounts for 3% of all dwelling units in Trinidad and Tobago. You have Sangre Grande, 6%. You have Arima, 3%. So if it is $400 million that is going to be collected on an annual basis, you're talking about 11, by rough calculation, you're talking about an 11 million addition that a low populated area such as Mayaro, Rio Claro will get $11 million. While Tunapuna Piaco, which is densely populated, would get like around $68 million. Right? So automatically, some regional corporations would be at a disadvantage. And we also have to consider the fact that a significant chunk of property tax collected from residential property may very well end up going towards the payment of outstanding bills. We saw what happened with the recent finance bill that we debated in here, paying long outstanding bills. So what I'm saying is that it may very well be absorbed into the operational aspect of the corporation, cleaning drains, maybe building a few more box drains, which I admit may very well help with with flooding. But to reach to the point where the property tax would allow these regional corporations greater or more significant or greater ability to make any significant capital investment to enhance local development, I'm not too sure. And without a formula to guide the Minister of Finance on how he supplements that, then it means that some corporations may run the risk of continuing to be underfunding. Some other funding options provided for under the amendment of Section 109, such as borrowing, is not yet feasible, and it is recommended in the short to medium term that this option not be explored because there are so much financial management issues that needs to be solved, that needs to be fixed. The administrative and fiscal self-management capacity and capability to manage capital investments would be at an embryonic stage upon the passage of this legislation, the passage and the full proclamation of this legislation. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to move on to the whole subject of citizen participation. And I want to look at how citizen participation is taken into consideration in this bill. When you look at clause 37(4), it says that a municipal corporation may hold quarterly meetings with its burgesses to inform of the performance of the corporation during the quarter and clear the concerns of burgesses. Senator Richards raised this point, and he alluded to the fact that the word may should not be there, and I fully agree with him. But let us look at other aspects of the bill in conjunction with this clause in which citizen complaints and participation takes place. We have the municipal council represents the interests and concerns of the burgesses. That's in their roles and responsibilities. They're also responsible for bringing grievances and service delivery requests to the public, to the relevant divisions of the corporations. The Municipal Council is also responsible for seeking redress on behalf of the members of the public who present legitimate claims of maladministration. All of these are commendable. Section 35E, under the division with responsible for public health, sanitation, and the environment, they shall be responsible for investigating public health complaints and abating of nuisances. 35F, the division with spatial planning and building inspection shall be responsible for investigating complaints and enforcing planning laws and regulations. Mr. Vice President, my comment on this is that most of what I've just mentioned currently exist. Apart from 37 subsection 4, which states that the corporation may hold quarterly meetings, I think we really missed an opportunity in this legislation to incorporate more citizen participation in local government. When I kept hearing about local government, and I did not read the bill until when I know the committee was finished with its work. I really looked forward to seeing something being provided for the creation of citizen participation committees to engage citizens in the selection and monitoring of public projects and so on. I looked forward to seeing committees comprising of representatives of NGOs, community-based organizations, the establishment of citizen information centers, all in an effort to get citizens and stakeholders to be more involved in the decision-making process with greater transparency and accountability. Now, I know the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government indicated that we are adopting a Just Start philosophy, and I hope that these things are in the near foresight and will be presented at some point. Now, as I come to a close end, Mr. Vice President, let us address the question in everybody's mind. Is this reform going to work? And my answer is that a lot will depend on the transition steps involved in operationalizing this. I would have preferred that the rollout of this new governance framework commenced with pilot municipal corporations. We select a few, we start with them, we roll out the governance framework, and then we see what happens. Take it one step at a time. Select pilot corporations, develop a core capacity to manage their own budget and financial systems. See how it works. Capture the lessons learned. Make the necessary changes, and then roll out to the entire 14 corporations. But that is not what being proposed, and I am open to hearing why something like that would not work. Senator Thiemel made an excellent suggestion on the recommendation of a transition task force, which I too would also like to support. I think a transition team made up of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government should be taken into serious consideration. I will also encourage the Minister of Finance to reach out to multilateral development banks for technical assistance or even a loan in operationalizing this decentralized model of local government. It is a complicated task that can be cumbersome and go into the wrong direction very, very easily. Jamaica, Suriname, Colombia, Brazil have all recognized the complexity involved with decentralizing local government and sought assistance from multilateral lending agencies when undergoing this exercise. It doesn't have to be borrowing a huge amount of funds. It could just be reaching out for guidance to get grants to demonstrate across the board what is the best and most suitable way to go about implementing this. I suspect the transition and implementation plans have not yet been decided on. Thus far, we haven't heard a timeline on the rollout of this new governance structure. How long is it going to take? We haven't heard what it's going to cost, how much this implementation of this framework proposed here in this bill is going to cost. How long proclamation is going to be done? Is it going to be partial proclamation or full proclamation? All of these things are critical information that should be brought to light at this point, Mr. Vice President, because from how I see it, a lot of work has to be done. Installing core financial and tax system, strengthening internal auditing capacity, providing human resource training, improving appropriate software and providing appropriate software and hardware, providing equipment and rehabilitating offices, capital investment capacity building. All of these things have to be done, Mr. Vice President. So my concluding remarks, Mr. Vice President, is that the operationalization of the core institutional building systems with respect to administration, planning, budgeting, and financial management, and local revenue generation to make this reform work is crucial to strengthen capabilities in local government so that they become more efficient and accountable as providers of services to citizens. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Lyder.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And Mr. Vice President, we are here to debate the bill which the government touts as their approach to this so-called local government reform. And Mr. Vice President, even though I'm coming very low in the batting lineup, I do appreciate the opportunity to contribute to what I consider to be quite an important piece of legislation before us. But in going through clause by clause in this bill, there are several sections that stick out to me like a sore thumb, and that fail to meet the standard for meaningful improvement to the administration of local government. Mr. Vice President, there are clauses, for instance, that amplify the overarching powers of not only the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, but also the Minister of Finance featuring again. And I've heard several senators before me speak about these overarching powers, once again falling on the hands of the Minister of Finance. And what they did not mention is that these are overarching powers that are given to the executive, which is the political arm of the state, Mr. Vice President. I recall hearing my colleague, Minister West, the Honorable Minister West, proclaim that this legislative changes will assist in making decision-making more efficient. But what the minister failed to point out is the potential risks of political interference in the delivery of goods and services to a politically diverse population. And I'm not casting any aspersions, merely simply saying it opens the door for the possibility of political interference. Mr. Vice President, I also found some difficulty in the manner in which these regional corporations will be funded, similar to Senator Deonarine and some of the other independent senators. I heard them speak about the issues with funding. And in particular, when we look at Clause 10 under the Property Tax Act amendments. So this is where I see some issues. Mr. Vice President, I noticed that the government has not spoken today. So I may respond to one of the last speakers on last week, one of the last unanswered government members. And I see Senator Hislop is here with us, and he made his maiden contribution. And, you know, during this contribution, he dedicated a significant amount of his time to extol the benefits of the THA system of administration that this bill borrows so much from, according to the senator. And I want to congratulate my colleague, of course, on delivering what would be his maiden presentation. And I indulge my colleagues here today to allow me to submit, for the purposes of the Hansard, an explanation as to why what this bill envisions runs against the goodness that Senator Hislop would have experienced in Tobago. I appreciate Senator Hislop's honesty and his forthrightness and the lack of fear in speaking truth, even if some of his Trinidadian colleagues may frown on it now. And what truths am I speaking about? You see, Senator Hislop described how efficient the THA was in delivering goods and services. The senator went so far as to state, by example, the fact that Trinidadians come across to Tobago and they all experience, and I quote Senator Hislop, "It is because there is a similar structure in place in Tobago, you can see and feel so much development." I'm certain, Mr. Vice President, anytime our brothers and sisters from Trinidad visit Tobago, they are blown away by the level of development on the island. We hear the comments, you know. We hear the comments about the quality of the road infrastructure, and all of what you see has been delivered by a local government construct that works. But using this truthful example, I can tell you I myself went across to Tobago, and I agree with Senator Hislop on how beautiful Tobago is. And seeing the work that has been done over the last 40 years by two different administrations, but even more so now seeing the great rapid improvements, the vision and the proper planning by the current administration after the people of Tobago found the foresight to put this administration in. So this example by Senator Hislop serves as an admission that Trinidadians have unanimously agreed that local government in Trinidad, by comparison, has been an abject failure for the last 7 years under this PNM administration, and for the almost 44 years of the 60 years since the 1962 independence of Trinidad and Tobago. When we see the drains that are all clogged up throughout this country, pavements broken, garbage piling up because of lack of funding. We heard this lack of funding said earlier. Local roads falling apart. Lack of resources given to councillors. Leaks. We see the roads, we see the entire infrastructure falling apart in Trinidad. It is no wonder they say those things when they go to Tobago. When we see these things, there's no wonder Trinidadians say local government is failing. You see, Mr. Vice President, I want to clear something up for my colleague, Senator Hislop, and those others on the other side. You see, in an effort to allow Tobago full autonomy, a formula was established in law to facilitate a certain percentage of the national budget to be allocated to the THA. And the UNC is indeed in support of strengthening Tobago autonomy. So we are in support of this. But why has the government not established a similar formula in this bill to allow for greater autonomy of local government as they preach today. Mr. Vice President, local government for the whole of Trinidad gets $1.5 billion, or less than 3% of the budget. In Cuba, the Cuba Corporation, or in Port of Spain, different constituencies belonging to the PNM and UNC. So we're not being biased. Whenever you get a little drizzle, massive floods form in the city of Port of Spain, and should they have gotten more resources, we would not see garbage floating by the stores on Frederick Street. Mr. Vice President, Cuba Tabuki Talparo Regional Corporation has a population of 178,000 people. Yet their allocation between 2016 and 2020 was a meager 110 million. Obviously, Mr. Vice President, with such a paltry sum, not much in the way of delivery can be expected. It is as if they have turned around the old saying and are now declaring the corporations to whom not much is given, not much is expected. But we are here to talk about local government reform, and Senator Hislop mirrored Tobago. But Port of Spain is the capital city of our country, a PNM stronghold. So if Senator Hislop wants to talk about mirror, I say to him, again I repeat, when it rains, the city floods due to a lack of garbage collection, so the drains are being clogged. That's a local government feature. And all they get in Port of Spain is $230 million. That's what they get. Those are facts. Let's look one more before I move on. Let's look at Sandy Grande Corporation, where the voters alone are 60,000 persons. What are they getting, Mr. Vice President? They are getting under $80 million. You see, this disproportionate spend results in gaps in governance, lack of resources meeting the burgesses, and the general underdevelopment, near abandonment here in Trinidad. So, Senator Hislop, when we look to compare the splendor and the true splendor of Tobago, and you want to compare it with Trinidad, then this bill is deficient, because it lacks the provision. Municipal corporations only obtain about 3% of total expenditure. So maybe the draft of this bill would consider an increase to 10% or a fixed 10% to bring them closer in levels with what is needed to ensure service delivery. So from what I see in this bill, before I move on, Mr. Vice President, is they are setting up the corporations in Trinidad for failure. And property tax, as mentioned in this bill from residential land alone, will not help this. You notice I said residential land alone, eh? And I will get back to that later in my presentation, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, but there was a lot of talk about funding. And in Clause 3, this bill treats with amendments to the Municipal Corporations Act that outlines funding and management of funds in the corporation. And on the topic of funding, and to build upon what I stated earlier about the lack of funding in Cuba, Port of Spain, Sandy Grande, to name a few, I again heard Senator Hislop state, I looked at the Hansard, where he states, what we have is a local government system that lacks funding. So, Mr. Vice President, this is not even the opposition saying this, not even the independent benches saying this. The government themselves admitting to the lack of funding. This is the fault of the government, because it is the government that must provide funds to the corporations, not the opposition. Senator Hislop made it clear that the responsibility for local government is being moved from the local government. He said that, because I'm going to quote what he said. I read in Hansard. And I quote as following: the responsibility of local government is not being moved from the Minister of Local Government to the Minister of Finance, but it is being moved to the municipal corporations, end quote. So through you, Mr. Vice President, to my good friend, Minister Awari, this would come as very sad news, as the responsibility for local government is indeed being moved away from the Minister of Local Government in this bill, according to Senator Hislop. But where my colleague Senator Hislop kind of got it wrong is that it's not that the corporations are being empowered. They're not. What in fact is happening is that the Minister of Finance will be holding the purse strings. And as the old adage goes, who pays the piper calls the tune. Furthermore, the Minister of Finance from this bill has the right to decide or to approve on organizational structure in the corporation in clause 33H. And I heard Senator Deonarine right before me glance over this. Glance over this. And I will show you my...
(53.1) be upheld. Senator Lyder, we have heard this articulated at length last week. Please keep your debate to more relevant and urgent matters.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Respectfully, Mr. Vice President, I believe I'm permitted to respond to Senator Hislop. And that is exactly what I'm doing here right now. I made reference to what Senator Hislop has stated, and I am responding to him directly here now. So though they may have some that may have repeated, I have the liberty to respond to Senator Hislop, and I thank you for allowing me to move forward. So on the 33H, and I will show in my presentation when I go through the relevant clauses, I heard Senator Hislop speak to the establishment of the Executive Council in section 33 to 35 in this bill, and the construct of the corporation with the Executive Council. He said from the list of divisions, and I quote, "This gives the corporations the management structure to more effectively deliver goods and services." That was quoted by Senator Hislop. I'm responding to that. And it's not that I have a problem with this, you know. Not that I have a problem with this. The problem I have is who will be vested with the power to decide the structure in the corporations according to the same section 33. So when I read in section 33H, it states clearly, a corporation shall establish its organizational structure in accordance with the divisions established under section 35A and may, with the approval of the minister with responsibility for finance, in consultation with the minister, review the organizational structure. That's there in 33H. So I ask myself, why is the power being vested in the executive, the political arm of the state? Nobody speaks about the political arm of the state. They speak about the minister, but they don't speak about the political arm of the state. We in the opposition will speak about the political arm of the state. You see, this places significant powers under the Minister of Finance. Why not instead seek approval from the Statutory Service Commission or the Chief Personnel Officer? Does this not open the opportunity for the Minister of Finance or the Minister, the opportunity, and I'm not speaking directly towards any Minister of Finance or any Minister of Local Government, does this not give them the opportunity to undermine corporations that may not be under their partisan corporation? This can result in the squeezing out of non-partisan corporations. So I'm not disparaging any minister here. And you only have to look at the THA Act of 1996 to know that the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Local Government does not decide the organizational structure, nor do they have the right to influence the expenditure after the budget allocation has been passed in Parliament. So I can't see why the Minister of Finance holds dominion in this regard in the local government. Mr. Vice President, also, as I stated earlier, the THA gets releases on a quarterly basis from the Minister of Finance based on budget allocations. I looked in this bill, and there are no mechanisms for quarterly releases from the Minister of Finance for the municipal corporations. Yet we want them to be autonomous. In the end, what we are seeing in 33H gives the Minister of Finance overarching powers. This bill opens the door for serious political interference to non-partisan corporations. You know what this is akin to? This comes like the owner of Manchester United who is going to decide who's going to play on the lineup for Chelsea against Manchester. Or if we want to use a local example, I'm not seeing my good friend, the Minister of Tourism and Culture here, but it's come like asking desperados to decide who will be the frontline players for Renegade in Panorama. That's what it comes like. One can only imagine what the structure in Sangre Grande would look like if this law is put into effect now, seeing that the Sangre Grande marginal is safely in the hands of the government's opposition. I'll move on now. Mr. Vice President, when we look at the functions of the corporation, clause 37, regarding receiving external assistance to pursue its development agenda, clause 37(2)(c) states a corporation may obtain, subject to the approval of the Minister with responsibility for finance, here he features again, from international donors, any grant and or technical assistance. So where an international donor or partner wants to give a 10 million or 15 million to a corporation, for example, if the Chaguanas diaspora wants to send some finance to help to develop the Chaguanas corporation, they need to get the approval of the Minister of Finance to be able to access these funds. Why must the Minister of Finance be involved in this transaction? This is a duly elected body. Why does a political appointee have to approve these matters? Why is that? Why did they not give it to an apolitical person such as the head of the FIU or the central bank? Any Minister of Finance, being a politician, can easily block a non-partisan corporation from receiving and benefiting from funds and technical assistance. It can happen. We see many instances of technical assistance being rendered by external bodies via the municipal corporations. A case in point was the interventions by the US military in Cedros, Mayaro, and Point Fortin a couple of years before, in partnership with the Superior, Mayaro, and Point Fortin municipal corporations. Many citizens benefited from free spectacles, from surgeries and other medical attention from their intervention. Are you saying to me, Mr. Vice President, that if any minister is not in agreement with the corporation on this, they can lose the opportunity to partner with external donors, causing citizens to lose any process? That has to be wrong. This once more opens the door wide open to the risk of political interference that can affect the lives of thousands, if not in some, but in all 14 corporations. Mr. Vice President, 37, subsection 37(3). Here's another one. Notwithstanding subsection 1, the minister may, where he determines necessary, in the public interest, take responsibility for the delivery of services in respect of the matters set out in the 13th schedule. And I have a problem here with this section, Mr. Vice President. And if you'll indulge me and permit me to give a small example. What if the UNC, or rather I should say when the UNC wins a new corporation in the upcoming local government elections? I call in no minister's name and no corporation. But what if the UNC wins another corporation? Hypothetically. And what if the current local government minister of the day, not today, of the day, is the Minister of Local Government? So he sits in his seat as an MP with an opposing corporation. What if that happens? And what can possibly happen? In advance of the next general election, he can starve certain electoral districts of funding and resources. There's a possibility. And this is not to disparage or impute motives on any minister, because it can't be any minister can engage in this kind of behavior, because this clause paves the way once again for the heavy political arm of the state to possibly engage in political interference. So why should a minister who toes a party line be the officer responsible and have the ability to unilaterally engage in the delivery of goods and services as he sees fit? Is that local government autonomy? Or is that further centralization? What is worse is that the minister can direct the resources of the corporation based on this clause. Again, what if the corporation outlines 30 million under this budget to determine according to the 13th schedule to improve garbage collection and waste disposal in particular areas? But the Minister of Local Government at the time decides that he will decide how half of this money is dispensed with and which communities receives it under his remit. Not only does it reek of political interference, the municipal corporation should not be looking over their shoulders at every turn to see the Minister of Local Government taking away. How does the saying go? Shall take away what the Parliament giveth in their budget allocation. And you know what they say about taking away what you give, right? You could get a cataboil. I don't want to see any of my friends on the other side get cataboil. It's not a nice sight. Mr. Vice President, let's look at the 13th schedule. Clause 3 in paragraph 5. Sorry, clause 3 in paragraph S, section 37, subsection 3, is especially dangerous when we consider the wide range of responsibilities detailed in the 13th schedule of this bill. There are 15 areas that a minister can affect by taking over responsibility for virtually every burgess at the local government level. If the minister has the power to appoint unto himself a percentage of the projects, this responsibility can disrupt the lives of citizens and derail the agenda of the corporation at the time, because they have a finite budget, Mr. Vice President. This can derail their budget. Let's look at another one. Drainage maintenance is the second responsibility under the regional corporation. And as we experience this now downpour that comes within the rainy season, this is on the utmost minds of every citizen today. Why should the minister be given the authority to usurp the powers of the corporation in this regard? This is not local government reform, as I said. This is local government impairment. This is a re-centralization of local government. This singular clause 37 will do more harm to local government than this government has done in the past 7 years being in office. Because whilst from the rhetoric of the spokespersons from the PNM, it sounds as if reform is coming, what instead we are observing is the reclamation of powers that were devolved from central government to the municipalities decades ago, and power specifically into the hands of the Minister of Finance and to a lesser extent the Minister of Local Government. This incursion into the 13th schedule results in this government is taking back control from the villager in Sandy Grande who entered local government to better his community, from the southerner in Vista Bella who wanted better roads and drainage, from the burgesses in St. Mary's, Maruga, who answered the call to action to serve their community. This bill, in my humble opinion, will be the end of local government as we know it. Because with the minister in charge, key decisions will be made from Balize House. This is where the key decisions are going to be made. Mr. Vice President, again, when I look at the fifth responsibility, development and maintenance of recreational grounds and cremation sites, it confuses me. How can a minister sitting in Port of Spain understand the local needs of citizens and children in Sandy Grande and Princess Town? Especially when we remember what happened when during the pandemic the government, the central government, shut down the cremation sites and stopped open fire cremation. It caused a lot of confusion. But you know, in every bad basket of apples, there's one good apple. You'll always find one. And I must say on the other side, there was one minister who took it upon himself to bust the gate open. I'm calling no names, but I'm happy that that was done, to allow the cremations. But the list goes on, and I won't have the time to delve into every single section. I will just list them briefly so that the country can understand the seriousness of the powers that will be taken away from the local government. So the other areas in the 13th schedule, as I briefly look, local health, food inspection, general sanitation, rodent control, vector control, and canine control, garbage collection and disposal, development and maintenance of cemeteries, crematorium and cremation sites, markets and abattoirs, disaster management. Listen to this. Listen to this list. Building inspectorate and municipal spatial planning, collection and disposal of fecal waste. You remember the fecal waste that was spewing out by Beetham? Collection and disposal, in Port of Spain that is, collection and disposal, distribution of truck-borne water, local economic development, ensuring clean environment within the municipality, repairs and maintenance of government and government-assisted schools, promotion of local tourism, sport and culture, when we see the sporting grounds falling apart. All of the above, the minister will have the power to take over responsibility if he so desires. So this is not local government autonomy. So when I hear my goodly colleague, Senator Hislop, state that local government is not being moved from the Minister of Local Government to the Minister of Finance, but to the municipal corporations and to the people, that's what he said. It is not consistent with what is clearly outlined that demonstrates the power will be retained by the political directorate in central government. And whoever, I know, because I really enjoyed his presentation, that part, I suspect somebody had to have written that part for him. So whoever wrote that part of the contribution for Senator Hislop would have served him a lot better to read section 37 of the bill. Mr. Vice President, we continue to see this. The clause I've cited once again is a clear example of the government, including in law provisions that create the potential for political interference in the delivery of goods and services in this country. We saw it in the TT special economic zones when the minister could grant license. We saw it and observed it in the gutting of the procurement legislation when the Minister of Finance can decide on any given moment what to remove from the purview of the independent procurement regulator. We saw it in those. There were a number of other bills in my short time in this Senate. Even in my maiden contribution, we saw where the minister had the right to appoint a chief veterinary officer. These are examples, and now we come here in this local government bill. So I want to endorse what my colleagues, the sentiments of my colleagues on the other place, that this bill proposes local government reform, in my opinion, is a mamagai. This PM government has neglected local government reform. And there's proof of it. After waiting in vain for the PNM from 2001 to 2010 to bring local government reform, despite not calling elections and claiming that changes were imminent to come, it was not until 2010 to 2015 when the People's Partnership Government, led by Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, brought reform to local government. This is when proportional representation was introduced for the first time. It was done by Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, where a party, by getting 25% of the vote, will secure one alderman, making a space for wider representation in the municipal corporations. This created a minority voice in several corporations and gives hope to the smaller parties that they too can sit at the table. And that's why we have an alderman in Diego Martin today. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar gave local government councillors offices, administrative assistants. Councillors had VAT exemptions on their vehicles, but today, they're under threat of being evicted from their offices as the government is not supplying the funds to pay rent on a timely basis. That's what we're seeing today. And of course, the PNM will tout of many papers they bought from 2005 to 2009, but with no meaningful reform. Mr. Vice President, I want to tackle one more issue before I close off. When we look at clause 3, at paragraph AK, The bill seeks to insert Section 78, which provides for the responsibility of the corporation to collect residential property taxes. And it states, 1. A municipal corporation shall be responsible for the collection of property taxes in relation to the residential land within the municipality. 2. Where a municipal corporation collects property taxes on the residential land in the municipality, it shall retain such taxes in its corporation fund established under Section 109. So the government is giving the municipal corporations access only to residential property tax. Only. So what happens to the corporation tax when it's implemented for commercial properties, for agriculture, for industrial properties? What happens to the corporation? I scoured through the bill. And when I was nearing completion of the bill, I saw where it states, and I quote, in clause 10 of the bill, would seek to amend the Property Tax Act, Chapter 7604. New subsection 3 would provide that the Minister of Finance may, by order, declare, so here we see the power of the Minister of Finance again, featuring, unbelievable, declare if agriculture, industrial or commercial taxes may be collected by the municipal corporations and what percentages may be retained. So it's his whim and fancy. So the government is boasting about collecting residential tax, but they are quietly chucking under clause 10 that the minister may collect taxes for the agriculture, for commercial and for industrial. I almost feel as though the government tried to slip it by us, but I found it. And I have a serious problem with this.
Senator, you have 5 minutes remaining.
It is clear to me that the government is seeking to have full control over the large sums of property tax that are being collected from the industrial and commercial and agriculture estates. It is very much the same, so in very much the same way that they're boasting about a 300 million that will be coming in from residential, why don't you let us know how many million is expected to come in from the industrial, from the commercial, and from the agriculture? Let us know. Don't come to the Senate and make the population believe that property tax is being thrown back in. So I submit to the Senate that this is important because the corporation, like property tax, should be receiving either the full or at minimum a fixed percentage of the taxes collected for agriculture, commercial, and residential. You see, Mr. Vice President, in many residential areas, there are commercial properties, there are industrial areas, not necessarily parks, but there are factories, there is agriculture in neighborhoods. And so many of the heavy equipment, trucks, could be destroying the roads, polluting the environment, and all the ills that comes with business and industry. So why should the government get access to the funds, to all that are needed by local government bodies to service their burgesses? I can give you an example of the inability of local government to service the burgesses in El Socorro, in Point Lisas, Grandi, the list goes on, all through the length and breadth of the country. And there are industrial and commercial businesses that, admittedly, they pay their fair share of tax to the state, but they are being blamed for the heavy equipment damaging the local roads. But I say that the blame falls squarely on this government for failing to patch the potholes and repair and maintain those secondary roads around the businesses. This failure is not the fault of the corporation, but of a government that simply has lost the script where local government is concerned. You see, according to clause 10, Mr. Vice President, the finance minister having the power to determine which taxes the corporation gets access to his discretion. This minister's overreach could take all the industrial, commercial taxes in San Fernando and determine that it should be used in the San Fernando Corporation. Where at the same time, if there is a possibility for the minister to debar and keep all the taxes from the Couva Corporation. Keep them from using some of the taxes from the commercial, industrial, and agricultural estates that contribute towards the depletion of the resources. Point Fortin will have significant revenues from Atlantic LNG. Who decides whether they get the taxes or not? The Minister of Finance. So there should be an independent valuation done based on the corporation's needs. The corporation's needs should be paramount here, Mr. Vice President. They should have the priority to have the funds first, and there should be a better assessment of the funds needed apart from the say-so of the finance minister. Mr. Vice President, the government would have the citizens believe that allowing local government corporations to have access to revenue collected via property tax would provide meaningful relief to the corporation. But I will just correct this for the record. You see, the issue with regional corporations is that they spend $1.5 billion each year on average in recurring expenditure via transfers and subsidies, and from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. The revenue from property tax, targeted to be a mere $300 million, is not even going to cover a quarter of this recurring expenditure for the municipal corporations. The percentage even reduces when we add capital expenditure that ranges from about 150 to 250 million for corporations in Trinidad in total. So this is wholly unacceptable, Mr. Vice President, and we call on the government to stop misleading the population on local government. Now, of course, let me get it clear, the UNC does not support property tax at this time. But if you're going to burden the citizens with this, and burden the people with that, at least put it back to the people so the people have a better quality of life, Mr. Vice President. And as I close, this bill is nothing more than a cosmetic attempt to mirror the Tobago House of Assembly. I have demonstrated clearly to this Senate that this bill does not put the power of local government in the hands of the corporations. Rather, it has further centralized local government, and while muting my good friend, the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, has now put great powers into the hands of the Minister of Finance to micromanage the affairs of the municipal corporations. What is worse is that it opens the floodgates to the possibility of political interference, which has long become the mantra of this PNM government. And as such, we in the United National Congress cannot support this bill, will not support this bill, as we seek to defend the interests of the citizens and burgesses throughout all 14 corporations. And I thank you.
Honorable Senators, I crave your indulgence to revert to item 3.
Announcements by the Vice President.
Honorable Senators, I wish to advise that the President of the Senate, Senator the Honorable Christine Kangulu, has requested leave of absence. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency the President Paula May Weeks, ORTT. By Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Mr. Michael Seals, whereas Senator the Honorable Christine Kangulu is incapable of performing her duties as a senator by reasons of illness. Now therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Acting Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(b) and Section 44(4)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Michael Seals, to be a member of the Senate temporarily, with effect from the 7th of June 2022, and continuing during the absence of Senator the Honorable Christine Kangulu by reason of illness. Given under my hand and seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and the office of the President, St. Anne's, at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 7th day of June 2022. Honorable Senators, a Senator is required to take the oath.
I, Michael Seals, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity to stand before this House and contribute on this ongoing debate on the Miscellaneous Provision Local Government Reform Bill 2020. Service to mankind is service to God, and there is no better time for this legislation to be passed than now. Mr. Vice President, today is a very historic day for me personally. And I must say, I have worked with all mayors and chairmen, vice chairmen, councillors, aldermen for over 6 years. And I am sure that all these mayors, all chairmen, all councillors and vice chairmen who have gone before are very excited to have this bill come forward today, and especially at this time in the history of this country. Mr. Vice President, before I actually begin my contribution, I want to thank a former Prime Minister who have passed away, may his soul rest in peace, and our present Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. First, I want to thank Mr. Patrick Manning for giving me the opportunity to serve as a councillor for over 10 years. I want to also thank our present Prime Minister for bringing this bill at the right time, and I want to thank him for giving me the opportunity to serve as a mayor of the second city in Trinidad, San Fernando, and also giving me the opportunity to serve as the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government for approximately 5 years and 4 months. I took these roles very, very responsible. Mr. Vice President, I would like to say to the people who are listening and the people who are watching on television something about myself, because I have served over 40 years in local government. I think nobody in this House has ever served that time in local government. Mr. Vice President, I was the first person created history in San Fernando when my father served as the last mayor of the borough of San Fernando, and I became the mayor of the city of San Fernando. So it was history created nowhere in the Caribbean. That never happened. As I said, 40 years of service to the people. I served on the administrative arm where I worked at the San Fernando City Corporation for over close to 40 years. I worked on the policy arm where I served, as you know, as I told this House. I served as a councillor, an alderman, mayor, and then the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. And I could tell you, and I could tell the public, and everyone knows, there's a lot of bureaucracy in getting things done at all municipal corporations. One of the most important factors is the lack of funding, which has always been a key issue that impacted service and delivery. Mr. Vice President, I would like to take this opportunity to thank a former Minister of Local Government, Mrs. Hazel Manning, who presented the draft white paper on local government reform in 2009. and that year I was a councillor in San Fernando, holding steadfast to the vision to ensure that communities can receive quality service through local government. Mr. Vice President, I want to pay special tribute to one of my colleagues who have gone to the great beyond, former Senator Franklin Khan. He laid the foundation for me as a local government practitioner and also local government minister. As you all know, 15 this was said many times before, 15 public consultations were held across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, and we saw over 8,000 members of the public taking part in these consultations. Mr. Vice President, I would also like to pay homage and special tribute to the present Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. He has the ability in legislative matters, and I know he has the capability because he started already. He's on the ground every weekend. I see him on the ground, and I am sure that he will take up the baton that I give him, and he will do better than me. He understands local government. And Mr. Vice President, local government is about the people. And if you can't connect with the people, then you shouldn't be in local government. The reformation and modernization of local government systems have always been a priority item on this government's agenda. The Miscellaneous Provision Local Government Reform Bill 2020 is a groundbreaking legislation and primarily seeks to put the necessary systems and structure in place to strengthen the institutional, operational, and administrative framework of local government, which will impact every household in Trinidad. So, Vice President, local government reform has been on the agenda for decades, but meaningful change has been limited to date. Permit me to return to the history books so I can give the public, and by extension the House, an idea how long this legislation has been in existence. And I wouldn't call all the dates, but I will call a few dates. This started 430 years ago in 1952, the earliest manifestation of local government by the Spanish colonists with the establishment of the Cabildo in the capital town of St. Joseph. 176 years ago, in 1846, the San Fernando Borough Council was established. 134 years, in 1988, a Rima Borough Council was founded by the Royal Charter. 55 years ago, in 1967, post-independence era, the Synanan Committee under Dr. Eric Williams was tasked with reforming local government. They found that there was a need for greater prominence of local government in national development, decentralization of key functions of local government bodies, and the need to empower communities by promoting their autonomy and self-determination. 42 years ago, in 1980, we saw the abolition of the Tobago Council and the introduction of a more autonomous Tobago House of Assembly. 39 years ago, in 1983, there was another attempt by the PNM administration which published a draft policy on community development and local government reform. 30 years ago, the PNM won the 1992 local government elections and pledged greater autonomy for municipal corporations. Hence the amendments to the Municipal Corporation Act of 1990 were undertaken, reducing the number of regions to 9, resulting in 14 municipal corporations we have now. 20 years ago, in 2002, Under the PNM administration, we engage in extensive consultation through all municipalities. And during the period, lastly, between 2004 and 2010, several policy documents were developed attempting to take much needed step forward, which includes the following. 1, a green paper in 2004, a draft white paper in 2006, a green paper on roles and responsibilities in 2008, a draft white paper in 2009, signaling an important pathway to modernization and transformation of local government. Mr. Vice President, as the bill is before us, we seek to amend 9 pieces of legislation and will contain 11 clauses. It encapsulates the recommendation and comments from public consultations and key stakeholders, and to seek to provide an effective and efficient local government system for all citizens. Mr. Vice President, in the 10 pillars of local government reform, local government system is a key to improving service delivery, ensuring greater governance and accountability, empowering communities, and driving economic and growth development at all local levels. As such, with the proclamation of the bill, the municipal corporations will be revolutionized, thereby accelerating the current system through the 10 pillars, which was said before, but I want to repeat it one more time with your permission, Mr. President. Security of funding, executive authority, new responsibilities, local contractors, more effective municipal policing, development control, infrastructure works, disaster management, involvement of civil society, and 10 regional development plans. Improvement and restructuring through these pillars will provide the framework we need to facilitate greater stakeholder involvement, participating decision-making, and dispensing of social services, while fostering greater productivity and accountability. Mr. Vice President, I'd like to expound on a few of these pillars to reinforce my support on this bill. Mr. Vice President, I would like to and when I come here to talk, I spoke about 6 years ago, and I wanted to let the people of this country know, especially the young people and the ones who are coming out of school and who want to get into serving the people of this country. I started off in local government, and I started cleaning the office of a former Prime Minister, Patrick Manning. That is where I started off. And there's no shame in where I started off. I also started as a daily paid worker, and one of my colleagues was telling me last week he also started off as a checker. It was one of his first jobs. Many of us started as a checker when we now started. I worked with the rubbish truck. I used to give out tools to the people who worked on the rubbish truck. And there's no shame in me saying this, because if I could reach where I reach today, anybody who working cleaning a drain, who working as a checker, as a daily paid. I worked as a daily paid worker for years. My life was in daily paid. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed working as a daily paid for so much. When I was offered to go on the staff, I refused, because you had to wait too long for your money. Daily paid is every fortnight, staff is every month. I was so indulged in my work. My father was the mayor of San Fernando, and I was a shop steward in the Contractors and General Workers Trade Union at that time. And they had a protest on the promenade in San Fernando, and I was holding a placard saying the mayor must go. And that's my father. And I couldn't go home that night but my mother opened the back door for me to come up the step. And I want to thank my mother for supporting me. She actually married a mayor and she made a mayor. And last week, Saturday, me and my mother celebrated our birthday together, born on the same day. And I want to encourage you all, this is local government reform too, to take care of your mothers and your fathers and your children. Because if you can't do that, you're not in local government. Because you have to set an example. If you want to represent people, you have to treat home first. Mr. Vice President, the first pillar of security of funding, as we all know, the challenges in municipal corporations face. Residential property tax will allow the corporations to collect residential land property taxes and to retain taxes in their corporation fund to assist with the burden of financial restrictions. Mr. Vice President, property tax is not new and needs no clarification. I remember, Mr. Vice President, when I was a child, going to primary school, I used to go with my father walking down Coffee Street into the town hall, saving his money, and every month we will pay our property tax. I'm sure many of you all have that experience. The Property Tax Act 2009 is the existing law that governs the obligation to pay taxes, and Clause 3 AM of the bill simply provides a mechanism whereby the corporation's revenue can be enhanced on an annual basis by the collection of such taxes, thereby alleviating persistent funding challenges which hinder the corporation's development. Mr. Vice President, this secure line of funding will be greatly benefited to all municipal corporations, enabling them to deliver goods and services to the public in an efficient, timely, and cost-effective manner. Executive authority. The passing of this bill will give municipal corporations a level of autonomy similar to that of the Tobago House of Assembly. It will allow municipal corporations to establish its organizational structure. These divisions under Section 35A include corporation services, finance, planning and allocation, internal audit, sport and youth, recreation ground, public health, sanitation and environment, spatial planning, building and inspectorate, monitoring and evaluation, municipal police, infrastructure development, maintenance, disaster management. Mr. Vice President, the committee also proposed to amend Section 33H2 of the bill and make it mandatory that any review of this organization structure was subject to the approval of the Minister of Finance and the Minister responsible for local government, given their respective role. Municipal Council and Executive Council. And I would urge everybody to get a copy of this act in the public, because this will determine you knowing the council after this reform and before this reform. The Executive Council and the Municipal Council are separate and distinct governing and administrative structures designed to work in tandem to achieve the efficient and effective functioning of the corporation. These amendments would see councillors and aldermen roles expanded for relevant divisions in the exercise of their powers. They shall be individually and collectively responsible to the municipal corporations. In this structure, the Chief Executive Officer fulfills a role similar to a permanent secretary, or rather an accounting officer, so that they can even have greater checks and balances. Terms of councillors and aldermen. The committee proposes to amend Section 11, paragraph C, subsection 3, to vary the terms of office for councillors from 3 years to 4 years. The importance of continuity. It is crucial for local government representatives to become full-time office holders. Even now, no matter time or day, Burgesses will reach out to their councillors for assistance with water challenges, garbage collection, flooding issues, and so much more. And Mr. Vice President, there's no better time than to say this. Local government representatives is one of the hardest working representatives we have in this country. Whether you come from Diego Martin, Point Fortin, Pinal Debe, Mayaro, these local government representatives work very, very hard. Very hard, I must say so. They are there for every event, in time of death, in time of recreation. They are there, they give up their time, they give up their money, and I want to recognize these hard-working councillors. At this point too, Mr. Vice President, I want to recognize the role of the administrative arm from the corporations, which will be the CEO, the monthly paid staff, the daily paid staff, and I have a passion for the daily paid because I work there and I understand them. Sometimes I say the monthly paid will look down at us as daily paid, but they need us to have a job. So, yeah, they need us to have a job. If I have no daily paid, they'll have no monthly paid. So I want to commend all these hard-working public officers, career public servants, as I call them, for ensuring that the citizens of this country benefit from the goods and services offered to the community. I want to recognize the reference of honorarium. In Clause 3E would be replaced by remuneration, with such remuneration being determined by the Minister in consultation with the Chief Personnel Officer. The specific guidance from the NIB regarding the insurability of these officers were also duly noted. Section 17.2 also speaks to mayors, aldermen, and councillors of a corporation fund being set up for their remunerations. The fund will comprise of appropriations by Parliament from the consolidated fund, revenue from fees, charges, fines, and taxes, including property tax. And last here we have the new responsibilities. Local government bodies will be responsible for expanding to dispensing of social services and the support, maintenance of schools and other services that impact the local communities. Now, corporations usually help all schools, but it will be more effective now, and all social services will be embedded into these responsibilities. Local contractors. Madam President, Mr. President, Vice President, I can speak at length of the advantages of this pillar for the Burgesses. Contractors will be engaged from the communities. They will come from the communities where works are expected to take place, and persons from the community will be hired by the said contractor to undertake the works. The power is in the hands of the Burgesses. This is what this bill is going to do. Give you, the people, the decision of power making and sharing. More effective municipal policing. Mr. Vice President, I took a vested interest in the Trinidad and Tobago Municipal Police. During my tenure as the former Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. With the reform of local government, the gap between the community and the officers of the law will be closed. I have the data, how many officers we have now and how much they intend to get. But at the end of the day, there will be 100 in each municipal corporation and 200 in Port of Spain Corporation. Mr. Vice President, these municipal police should be engaged in the community, interacting with the churches, with the NGOs, with the schools, because they are seen as community policing. They have other rules for them, but municipal police was engaged for and should be interacting with all the communities in the community and getting to know the people who in the community. Whether they belong to whatever, the church, the temple, the mosque, wherever, whether they have community councils, community, whatever is in the community, the municipal police should be doing that more. When I was there, they were actively involved, and I want to commend the municipal police today for the job they have been doing throughout this country, headed by Mr. Sagram Singh, the father of our senator here today. He takes his work very seriously. We have serious people in the municipal police. We have Mr. Santana in San Fernando, and we have Mr. Mohammed in Port of Spain, and all the ranks of the police officers throughout. We have a person by the name of Mr. Belford, who does all the training and recruitment of the people. Doesn't know what goes on behind the municipal police. You just see them out there, but you don't know what they're doing. They do a lot of hard work. So I want to commend the municipal police officers throughout the country, and I urge them to continue to keep up the good work that you are doing on behalf of the people of this country. And you notice I am saying, everything I say it on behalf of the people of this country, because we all here on behalf of the people of this country. They put us there, and they expect us to do what they want. And saying that, I always say it, and I wouldn't hesitate to say it again. I got advice from our former Prime Minister, and he told me this will take me through my political career. And he said, young Kazim, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You hear more and you talk less. And get the job done. And you will get the job done as a local government representative. Civil society, Mr. President, Vice President, communities will be encouraged to meaningful participation in decision making. As I said, these things will involve the community, and the community will be involved in whether you're building a drain, whether you're building you're seeing about a park. The community will have the say now. And there's an important role for a committee at all all municipal corporations. And I want to urge all corporations who are not doing it to start doing it. There's a committee called the Regional Coordinating Committee, which involves stakeholders from WASA, HDC, TNTEC, CPEP, TTPS, the Red Group. Wherever you have a major stakeholder, these people come and meet once a month with the corporations. Now, these meetings is very important because people come with HGC matters to a councillor. But the councillor has nothing to do with HGC. But with these committee meetings, they will be able to assist the community by meeting once a month at this very important meeting. And I urge all corporations who are not meeting to start meeting, so you will be able to serve the community you represent more effectively. You have people from the fire service, you have people from all over, all stakeholders, and there you will get your answers, because they come, they take your complaints, and they go back, and they get it solved for you as a matter of time. Mr. Vice President, I want to commend the Joint Select Committee, because I was a member for the first term and the second term. And the bill was introduced on the House on 2 occasions. I would like to take this opportunity to thank both members on both sides for their invaluable insight and contribution, as well as the rich discourse that ensured during the deliberations of the bill. I must say that personally, it was a very rewarding learning experience for me, as one of which I remain eternally grateful for years to come. I must say that from the very outset, this committee adopted a very purpose and structured approach to the task ahead. And, well, I don't want to go into the details, but there were 10 meetings, 9 had public stakeholders, 40 written submissions. Everybody was involved, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a fisherman, whether you're selling on clothes, whether you're selling in the market, whether you belong to the National Insurance Board, the Water Sewage Authority, the public administration, everybody was represented there. So everybody had a say what was taking place and could have comment in these 2 committees. Mr. Vice President, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to our team of people. And I would start by thanking one Mrs. Ida Eversley of the Chief Parliamentary Council Department for her invaluable support and commitment, as well as members of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, headed by the Permanent Secretary, and all the members of the working staff at the Ministry of Rural Development, and especially I want to mention Ms. Annalene Innes, who heads the legal department at the Ministry of Rural Development. There were a lot of NGOs, CBOs, state agencies. Everybody was involved, and everybody played an important role in making sure this bill reaches the stage where it reached today. In concluding, Mr. Vice President, and I might finish before, but I could talk wholly on local government reform. That is my life. The citizens of this country are ready and waiting for this reform. You could go to any corner of this country. Some people might say no on one side, but they will say yes on the next side, because they want it to happen. I have been talking to them for over 6 years. I have been to every statutory meeting in this country. I have been to every single corporation, the 14 corporations, doesn't matter where you are, rural or urban, and everybody wants this reform. There might be some tweets to it, but the bottom line, they want the reform. They can break free of the bureaucracy that hinders implementation and that cripples their progress. And speaking on bureaucracy, I want to say here today that while working at the San Fernando City Corporation, and it happens when I came as the minister, I have observed that in the building department and 14 corporations in this country, some things have to be straightened out. Plans cannot take so long to pass. People want development in this country. You cannot and you must not. Things are happening where you must use somebody from the corporation to draw a plan. That shouldn't be so. You are free to choose whoever you want to draw a plan for you. The plan must not be alternated by the people who works at the corporation. I say in this without fear or favor, because I get complaints, it's a fact, and it happens. More importantly, the CEOs have a responsibility, and the council, which is your policy arm, should ensure this does not happen and hold the public to ransom. because people take loans and they want their plans passed. And it takes so long and they hold it up for small and petty reasons. So I am urging all the corporations to ensure that this department, the building department, which falls under the engineering department, you all take a serious look at it and ensure that it doesn't happen, it doesn't continue. The reform will help stop this, And that's why some people just don't want the reform, but they will have it. In closing, I must reaffirm my support to the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee and the Miscellaneous Provision Local Government Reform Bill 2020, and look forward to seeing the results and the fruits of the labor of this very important, very, very important bill today. I want to thank you, Mr. Vice President, thank all the members on my side, the opposite side, the independents, because I've heard your views and I could concur with some of them. And I want to thank the people of this country, who reach out to their local government representatives, and under this reform, they'll be able to reach out to them in a more fruitful way. May God bless all of us. May God bless Trinidad and Tobago. May God bless all local government representatives, whether you're administrative arm or policy arm, and continue to guide us with good health and long life. Thank you very much.
Senator Thompson-Ahye.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for affording me this opportunity to join the debate on the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Act 2020. It's always good, to come after a good man. And now I said come here, I didn't say go. And one who was born into local government, nurtured in local government, worked in local government, and indeed, Mr. Local Government. A good family man, and I was surprised when I first joined the parliament and he said, we are family, but we won't share how we are family. Mr. Vice President, we live in a democracy. Democracy has been famously described as by President Abraham Lincoln in his well-known Gettysburg Address as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Democracy is about power of the people, self-determination and self-government, and empowerment. But it's not everyone who holds the view of the importance of involvement of people, about people taking responsibility for their own governance. Long ago, the mighty striker sang, "Some want a Zephyr motorcar, others want piece of land. Dorothy lost she man, she want to complain to Dr. Williams." What Stryker was saying is that we want the government to do everything for us, even solve our intimate relationship problems. Local government calls for the involvement of all our people in solving our problems. 52 years after thousands of young people march in the streets of Port of Spain and the plains of Caroni with fists upraised crying, "Power to the people," this bill is attempting to give power to the people. And there is power in the people. We proved that in my own neck of the woods when we bought our homes in the late 1970s and early 1980s and found that the clauses in our contract, which had enticed us to purchase with expectations of infrastructure, were empty promises. We established a residents association and we fought for a school, for play parks, open spaces, football fields with spectator stands, and the men even planted trees along the boulevard to beautify our area. At first, we had no meeting spaces of our own, but we walked with chairs and met sometimes in my garage, other residents' living room and dining room, where wherever we could, until the school was built and we began to meet there, and we accomplished much. Residents were committed to the cause, even fanatic. I had to use my mediation skills when the psychologist in the group complained angrily that another resident, a lawyer, later a magistrate, had awakened him at 3 a.m. to share another one of his brilliant ideas for improvement of the community. This bill, as the title clearly states, is about reform of local government. The word reform is generally considered a positive word. It usually connotes change with a view to improvement of a person or an institution. In this case, it is an institution, local government, that is being reformed. So this bill, in effect, promises to improve the laws governing and impacting local government to achieve a more efficient and effective system of governance with people at the center of governance. I say generally because when the word reform is used in Trinidad and Tobago, it does not always evoke a feeling of hope that people or things will get better. On the contrary, it arouses a degree of cynicism at times, evidenced by astutes and utterings such as, same old, waste of time, that and God face you wouldn't see, even before the proposed changes are implemented. But I am a merchant of hope and will not despair. I am sure we all agree that local government reform is needed and that is long in coming. But will this bill achieve the desired reform? Is it taking us in the right direction? It depends on whom you listen to. Does it involve wide enough cross-section of the people to be a judge people-centered? The government is confident that the responses to these questions are in the affirmative. Senator Hislop saw its potential for building local capacity by engaging local contractors and described the bill as a life-changing piece of legislation. Was it the euphoria of a maiden presentation, I wondered? No, that was not kind. I apologize. The opposition strongly refutes Senator Hislop's description of the bill. Senator John described the bill as convoluted and vague and spoke of geographical discrimination and felt that there had not been enough consultation. This is a point to which I will return. My fellow independent senator, for example, Senator Richards, pleaded for relief in property tax for certain categories, such as retirees. There is precedent in Barbados Revenue Authority Act, which allows a 60% rebate on property tax to retirees 60 years of age or older who are in receipt of a pension and live in Barbados for at least 180 consecutive days of the year. The pensioner must also occupy the house for permanent habitation exclusively, have no tenant, or do not have a business operating on that property. Senator Richards proposed a range of taxes to suit particular circumstances and gave concrete examples. Senator Timol largely batted on the streets of engineering and spoke of extreme frustration with the slow building inspection process and the avenues for corruption engendered thereby. Senator West gave such a glowing account of the benefits of the bill that she had me mesmerized. She earned every cent of her salary and seemed to be on the mark, pun intended. She forced me to reread the bill to see if we had the same version. However, I would still like greater clarity on Section 109 to inform me what sums, and especially from where, may be disbursed by central government to the corporation fund as spoken of in Clause 78. I cannot overemphasize the importance of local government. It has been described variously by the Thorne Commission on Local Governance, which was commissioned by the Barbados government in 2021 as the institutional structure required to facilitate citizens' intervention in national and local affairs. and a paper by the University of Pretoria described the role and purpose of local government as a crucial aspect of the process of democratization and intensification of mass participation in the decision-making process. You will not find a definition of local government in the bill, as that term went out of fashion when we enacted our original Municipal Corporations Act and created a system of cities, boroughs, and regional corporations with mayors, aldermen, and councillors. In keeping with the new status of local government personnel, we now have in Clause 3, instead of city clerk and town clerk, the more highfalutin term of chief executive officer. And in keeping with the title and more onerous duties, Clause 3E and G provide for mayors, aldermen, and councillors to receive remuneration rather than honoraria. And Clause O provide for a pension scheme. I have no problem with those arrangements. Mr. Vice President, Clause 3M establishes the councils of a corporation, namely a municipal council, which deals with broad policy and oversight and is a decision-making body, and the executive council, which is the implementing body and sets out their respective responsibilities. Now, I am concerned about the limited number of persons who may comprise the executive council. No more than 8 persons, and the wide range of responsibilities assigned to this body, and would wish to be assured that this issue has been thoroughly considered. Is the range of responsibilities uniform across the various corporations, or can one corporation have a particular responsibility that another corporation decides is not important in their scheme of things? For example, Arima may decide that it was important to do certain cultural projects that are directly relevant to its first peoples, an issue to be probed by the JSC on Human Rights, Equality, and Diversity in 2 days' time, while Tenapuna Piako may find that is irrelevant to its special needs. I observe that Clause 3N, Roman 3A, provides for the corporation to employ such persons as it considers necessary for the due performance of its functions, and hope that that power would not be honored more in the breach than in the observance. Far too often, there are departments of government which cannot carry out their functions effectively and efficiently because they, and I quote, do not have enough staff. We have even heard that cry at the level of government departments who appear before the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. The list of responsibilities enumerated, which in Section 35A to J and Section 37A of the Municipal Corporations Act are, the responsibilities are tremendous. The list is long. But I hope it is not daunting, and we will be back to square one. Mr. Vice President, may I remind for the umpteenth time those who bring draft laws to this Senate that the word dependence, when it refers to people, the noun is spelled with an A. When it describes a state of dependency, it is used as an adjective. It is spelled with an E, dependent. Please, therefore, correct B and C. Part 5 of the bill deals with property tax. I've already alluded to that and endorsed the suggestions of my colleague, Senator Richards, that the provisions could be carefully reviewed to offer relief where necessary, and repeat my request for further clarity on Section 109 as set out in Clause 109. The other observations I've made on grammar I will deal with at the committee stage. That's been 4 years. I've been saying one doesn't use comprise of, but comprises or compose of. But it seems some people have grappled that expression to their bosom with hoops of steel. Ah, well, thank God SEA is over, so the students will not be misled. Mr. Vice President, if I had not read this bill, and in particular the 13th schedule, I would not have known that the municipal corporations have responsibility for development and maintenance of cemeteries, crematoriums, and cremation sites, especially cemeteries. I suggest they visit the cemetery at Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Arouca to understand what a well-maintained cemetery would look like. I'm grateful for the provision which seek to upgrade the burial ground regulations. So we hope that when next year November 1 and November 2 come around, the persons employed with the authority, with the various corporations will not be pointing you to go and let this one to clean up your cemetery ground and go on because it would have been done. Now, I did say I return to the point made by Senator John about consultation. I'm concerned and wish to be advised as to the nature of the relationship between the corporations and the local village councils and resident associations. How do they meet? When do they meet? On what issues can they and will they confer? Mr. Vice President, when you see that the corporation have responsibility for schools in their area, I wonder if there was any consultation with schools and the students. Barbados does not have a local government system, but the Thorne Commission on Local Governance had among its terms of reference to consult with all government agencies, with private sector agencies and non-governmental organizations, with trade unions, secondary and tertiary institutions, and the public. It would certainly help if the Ministry of Education, would be able to identify persons from various institutions, educational institutions, who can be a part of this governance process. If you have the corporations near to the schools because they're monitoring, it would, when the Ministry of Education announces the start of term, they wouldn't have to go personally to the school or wait for the schools to inform them about what schools are in a state of readiness, because there would be such an interaction between the corporations and the schools that they would be able to advise early o'clock what needs to be done, and they would have been doing what needs to be done. And also, the police, the community police, it really would give new meaning to community police so that they would be close to the schools, not to arrest students, but to assist them. They will become like friends of the schools, so that when we have situations occurring with students who are acting out, the police would be able, in conjunction with the schools, the community police, who are specially trained in restorative justice, to find out what is happening with that child. Not what is wrong with you, but what is happening with you, to see how we could assist the child before it reaches a critical level where we have to consider arrest. So these relationships are very important. Remember that children have a voice. We spend a lot of money educating secondary school students. Allow them an avenue to use that voice for the betterment of the community. Local government is about relationship. And if there is a relationship, one can involve themselves in solving problems with children even before though they reach critical situation. Mr. Vice President, all citizens have a collective responsibility to play a part, no matter how small, in the proper governance of our country, at both national and local level. I would strongly suggest that we seek always and have under constant review various methods of engaging citizens of all ages, all creeds and races, and not forgetting those with special needs, adults and children with special needs, to see how we can assist them to become the best citizens that they can be. So in this worthy and laudable goal of taking responsibility of building the best Trinidad and Tobago that we can, we have to consider all citizens. May God bless our multiracial, multireligious, and multicultural country. It is evident we are embarking on an exciting journey in our history where there are many opportunities, but there are challenges to build a new society. only today I received a long WhatsApp message from Mayaro community telling me that they consider that they are neglected by the government and the opposition. So we have one segment of the society feeling that way. We ought to see how we can engage, how we can help. The point was made that there is not equity, and how best can we address that question of equity in the society. So we are about building a new society, a new nation, one of national unity. Again, may God bless our multiracial, multi-religious, and multicultural country. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Jayanti Lutchmedial.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity to contribute on this debate today. Mr. Vice President, we are here to discuss a very important matter because the issue of reform at the local government level, or at any level really, it sets the tone and context for our development as a country. Local government, and I spent some time chatting with some of my colleagues who are in local government, including my own councillor and others, you know, who gave me the little tagline that they said, it's every life of every citizen every day. That's what we are about. And that is essentially what local government means. So I started to think about local government in my own life, and I would think about the last thing you do when you go to bed at night, a lot of us, you put out your garbage. That's local government, there's a rule there. When I drive out of my driveway in the morning, first thing to go and get my doubles on the, what we call the cross in San Fernando, and I go down into a pothole that I could potentially pop my neck in, that is local government, because nobody is fixing the pothole in the road. And so you see the impact of local government in every sphere, every segment of your life, every day. And that is why the issue of reform is one to be taken very seriously. Mr. Vice President, our local government structure, 2 city corporations, 3 borough corporations, and the 9 regional corporations, have a number of responsibilities, including public health, the secondary roads, drains, water courses, markets, recreation grounds, and all of the other things listed as we see in the 13th schedule put forward in the bill. So whether you live in a rural area or in the city, or whether you're a stay-at-home, work-from-home parent, or you're a lawyer, doctor, politician, engineer, whatever it is, you require the delivery of certain goods and services and basic utilities which could only come through local government. Now, the minister says when piloting the bill that this is about empowering the people of Trinidad and Tobago in a better system of governing themselves. And, Mr. Vice President, dare to dream really is a good tagline for this government, because a lot of what they're doing is really just selling dreams. And much of what they have promised so far in the legislative, in the entire package of legislation that we've seen in the last at least 2 years that I've been here, has been really a lot of dreams, because a lot of it just fails to materialize. And I really do sometimes wonder when we hear about this just start approach, if this is a just start of reform or if this is a just start to campaign for local government elections later on this year. Because this bill really doesn't deliver any substantial reform. What this bill is bringing here today is just start campaigning to say that we have passed local government reform, so we have something to talk about because we need to start campaigning with local government elections due this year. The bill promises, like a lot of the long list of dreams perhaps, it may very well join that list of things that have not yet been implemented. And we talk all the time about the implementation deficit that we face when it comes to legislation in this country. And that is the biggest obstacle being faced when it comes to our development. So somehow, in part of this dream that is being sold to us today, we are told that local government issues, and I'm grateful to a very experienced local government practitioner, Minister Hosein, for pointing out two of the biggest issues that local government faces: funding and bureaucracy. And nothing in this bill addresses either. Nothing. Nothing is going to change the fact that you have disparities in the allocation of resources between regional corporations. Nothing is going to change in this bill about the fact that, in fact, I think it might make it worse because of the structure that they have, or the formula or lack of a formula being used here when it comes to the collection of taxes, property tax in particular. The bill will actually create more inequity by that formula and the proposals contained in property tax, and I'll get to that in a short while. So all the dreams that we are here to discuss today, I think it might turn out to be some nightmares for some people when it comes to if they really do implement this and the way that it's implemented. But when it comes to meaningful changes that will actually impact the day-to-day lives of citizens, as I explained, every single day you wake up in the morning and you walk out, you step beyond the boundary of your house, local government has a role to play in it. And what will change for the citizens of this country? By this bill, I could say not very much. No significant policy change, nothing whatsoever. And what we are seeing, though, is a commitment by the government to something that we have seen them being committed to from day one, which is to insert political influence in in institutions which ought not to have political interference. We are seeing the insertion of something called an executive council to exert political influence in the administration and the day-to-day running of our local government authorities. And that, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Vice President, is something that we cannot stand for and that we really do object to. Because when you have elected representatives sitting on a municipal council, and you are saying that the municipal council will have a certain role, but then you are creating an executive council, you are silencing the voice of the minority. And I think many persons have spoken to that before, but just to give you an idea of it, there are only, I think, 6 of the 14 regional bodies which are purely controlled by one political party or the other. All of the others, there's a mixture. So I'm not going to say that it's, we expect it to happen here, we expect it to happen there, whatever, but you have, for example, in Shogunas, let me use the Shogunas Borough Corporation as an example. You have one electoral district held by a PNM councillor. Does that PNM councillor not have a right to have a say in certain decisions that could be made with respect to the running of the corporation? Does it not affect that person's burgesses? In San Fernando, where I live in one of the 3 areas currently under the UNC. So they are a minority, and we have a minority council. And I see it every day how difficult it is for them to perhaps get things done, but they try and they work together. What this structure is going to do is really create a situation where that minority, whoever it may be, in whichever corporation it is, they are really going to suffer, and not them personally, but the people who elected them and who voted for them and who put them there. Because the actual day-to-day running, and you have someone now, a CEO, and a CEO is essentially the equivalent of a permanent secretary. And when the bill was being piloted, there was they drew the comparison between the executive council being like a cabinet. So they said, okay, we'll have The municipal council, that will be like a parliament. And the government wants to tell us that this one-sided, politically colored creature called the executive council will be somehow more efficient, and it'll be like having 14 little cabinets all over the country. And that is somehow preferable to what exists now, and preferable to having the council as they presently exist, meeting and having discussions and setting the work programs and so on of the corporations. Mr. Vice President, we have a cabinet now that is failing miserably in delivering goods and services to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. How 14 little cabinets all over in every corporation is going to help that? It will not. It will not change anything. The same problems that you hear about in central government. The minister made reference, he said everybody's complaining, the CEO not listening. Well, I have heard many ministers over time complain, the PS don't listen. But you know, there's a reason why CEOs and PSs don't have to listen to politicians and ministers or mayors and people who change with every electoral cycle. Is because they have that insulation. That is the beauty of the public service. That is the beauty of having people who are there, independent, not being, beholden onto any political party or person for their appointment and their position, and they could act according to the rules and the regulations and all of the systems that are there and that are in place. So what you're going to have now by virtue of this act, this bill, is an encroachment on the role and the function of the chief executive officer, who will now be forced to abide by this executive council, who will have the executive council getting directly involved in the day-to-day management. And the executive council is essentially going to be appointed by whoever has the majority of the seats in that particular corporation. And those who are in the minority will simply be sidelined and have no voice. Together with, and the voice is not the voice of that particular person, but the voice of all of their burgesses. Now, again, if you don't address administrative structures within regional corporations or city corporations, then having an executive council changes nothing, because you have the same issues. Let me give you an example of an issue. My area is called an extended boundary. There are 2 extended boundary areas in the city of San Fernando. Because of that, we have everything is contracted. We don't have what you call wards. And that is a serious issue, because with the deployment of, so everything down from the picking up of the garbage to cleaning drains to whatever it is, it has to be contracted. And there's a multiplicity of issues that come with that. And it's all because of some little administrative arrangement that needs to take place and that ought to be fixed and should be fixed easier. Things like that being fixed will make a meaningful impact on local government. Not establishing an executive council where the elected politician gets to now interfere in the work that is properly under the remit of the chief executive officer. That is like saying you are appointing a parliamentary secretary, for example, who's like a junior minister. So you have your minister, you have a junior minister, and the junior minister can take over the job of the PS in a ministry. How does that make any sense? How is that right? How can we sit back and think that that has any merit whatsoever? Mr. Vice President, I know that the other side, they like to, they would chuckle and sniggle when Senator Mark talks about, dictatorship and so on. But we're seeing it right here. I had to go back and look at the Hansard because I wasn't sure that I was hearing correctly when the minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General, Senator Sagram Singh Suklal, in speaking about the Executive Council, she called it a revolutionary milestone. And this is what the minister had to say. The inclusion of minority political representation will not be consonant with the spirit and intention of this policy for local government reform. To include a minority would be damaging to it and pose a probable challenges to the objective of an executive council. And the minister went on to say, right in the Senate, we see the predicament that we face in sometimes passing law and getting the support of the opposition. So what the government wants is an opposition that is either silent or roll over. That's what they want. And they want to just eliminate the voice of opposition altogether from any regional corporation. So, the Minister said this is why the remit is given to the mayor, the chairman, to determine the composition of the executive council. Say, my respectful submission, and one of the reasons in particular council we do not have minority representation. The executive council is the administrative arm of the corporation. The inclusion of a minority would usher major complexities, specifically where other parties exist on that particular political trajectory. Mr. Vice President, what the government has stood here and said is that in the day-to-day administration of our local government agencies, our local government bodies, we don't want to hear nothing from the minority. They could sit there and so you know what is going to boil down to at the local government level now because of this bill? Exactly what we have here. The opposition could have its say, but the government will have its way. The opposition could sit down here and we can talk and we can talk and we could put forward our concerns and we can hope that the population is listening, because that's what the people who are not on the minority, who are not on the executive council, that is basically what they will do. They will be able to sit at the municipal council and say what they want and participate in decisions if they are in the minority. As I said before, I will use San Fernando as an example. I think it is 6-3 or something like that. So if it comes to a vote, obviously they are in the minority. But then you have the ones who have the majority in the corporation will now or possibly be part of the day-to-day administrative running of the organization. And they can execute decisions without those decisions even being brought before the municipal council. So persons who are in the minority may not even understand or know some of the decisions being implemented by this executive council at an administrative level. And that is a danger to democracy. And it has no place in our system where we are trying to, the UNC pushed proportional representation because we were trying to increase the level of democratic input into local government. And what you have here is a removal of democracy from the administration and the running of our local government institutions, Mr. Vice President. So I know that several other speakers would have raised that issue of the Executive Council, and I think it is worth repeating some of the concerns because it really is a serious issue to be considered when we are moving forward with this local government bill. The other thing I want to say is that when we speak about local government reform, and this is why I call it Just Start the Campaign, because if you're really serious about local government reform, Mr. Vice President, I would have thought that we would have seen something about constitutional reform. There's nothing in our constitution that speaks to local government. Local government is not given recognition in the highest law of the land. And if we're really serious about reform and really serious about giving local government the prominence and the importance that it deserves, then that would have been a good starting point. And we don't have to look very far for that. I look just to Guyana, for example. It is in their constitution, and I really do find that the way that they set out the system of local government in their constitution to be very interesting. They talked about, what the parliament may provide for and so on, how it is to be divided. Even when you have elections for local government, it's set out in the constitution of Guyana, the duties of, they call them local democratic organs. And all of this is set out in their constitution so that you wouldn't have a situation like what we had under the former PNM administration where local government elections were just willy-nilly delayed for 6 years. And people's right to vote for the elected representative at the local government level was simply taken away from them by simple majority. So if you're really serious about local government reform, that is where you start. That is where you start. Not taking away the minority and pushing them to the side and say, yes, we have an executive council that will basically run the corporation and, you three who are in opposition sit down there and stay quiet. That is not reform. That is taking us back to, I don't know what it is. I don't think we've ever had a situation where we have been so regressive in our thinking. Okay, well.
Senator Lutchmedial, let's try to stick to matters directly to the bill at hand.
Yes. Well, yes, Mr. Vice President, I think that's directly at that. Anyway, let me give another example of constitutional recognition of local government. Again, Jamaica. In the Jamaican constitution, they don't go as in-depth into the elections and so on, but they talk about, and I found this to be very interesting, they talked about what the parliament can do, not the Minister of Finance, like what we have now in this bill, in terms of the role of designating and making provisions for municipal government, as they call it. But the Parliament can, make provisions for how monies are being spent and generation and expenditure of revenues and assigning functions relating to the manner of the local authorities and the holding of the elections and so on. So right here in our region, we are seeing that you have that constitutional recognition given to local government, and as I said before, that is perhaps where I would have liked to see local government reform really start, if we are saying that it is so important and we want to give it the importance that it deserves. Now, the other matter I want to touch on, which I think a lot of speakers have spoken about, is property tax. And I don't think I could say much more, except I would agree with what most of the speakers said about the inequality that can arise simply because of the difference in population density. When you pull out one type of tax, residential tax, to be collected by the local government, then you give a disproportionate amount of revenue to areas that are concentrated as residential versus agricultural versus commercial. But at the end of the day, the services to be provided, and again, I'll just have to use San Fernando as an example. We have some areas that are very residential, high-density residential areas. We also have a big commercial area. But the city corporation has to service everybody. They're picking up everybody's garbage. They're picking up, they have to fix roads for everybody to drive on. Commercial vehicles are utilizing the same roads that residential areas are using. So when the minister now holds the power to allocate the resources, it could lead to a lot of disparity and inequality, which is the biggest complaint that people have about local government. Again, not solved by this bill, but perhaps made worse by the provisions included here. I want to ask one issue, and perhaps it could be clarified by the minister in his winding up. I've seen a provision here whereby the rules, the preparation of the rules by the Board of Inland Revenue will be shared with the local authority, which must collect the taxes. Now, I maintain what every speaker on our bench has said before. I'm opposed to property tax, blanket, not even at this time, just opposed. But in the event that someone does not pay their property tax, there are a number of enforcement measures contained in the Property Tax Act, which is the law, it's fine. Who is responsible for the enforcement? It will be the Board of Inland Revenue, as far as I could see, because I haven't seen any amendment here that would vest the enforcement of those, all the different things that you can do under the Property Tax Act to enforce against person's property and so on if they refuse to pay the property tax. Again, you are creating a lot of bureaucracy because the regional corporation is now responsible for collecting the tax and can keep it. They will now have to send or have a mechanism through which they can alert the Board of Inland Revenue, I presume, that someone has not been paying their taxes, what is the period of time, and there's a process to be followed. You don't just automatically do something. You have several different processes involved in that enforcement of the Property Tax Act. Who is going to be responsible? How is it going to work? What are the mechanisms? Are they there? The interworking relationships of arms and different units and bodies and ministries and organizations and government in Trinidad and Tobago is a headache for anybody. Ask anybody, government, opposition, independent, man on the street, anybody, north, south, east, or west. I don't think there's anybody in this country who can say that they have found having to deal with a various arms of the government to get something done. Consider it's an easy system or easy process. So this issue of property tax now and the enforcement, I understand they're saying, well, okay, you collect the tax and you can spend it. It's one of the ways that they have sought to address the funding for the corporations. Issuing fixed penalty notices by the municipal police and the collection of the residential property tax. But really, I don't see how it will work when it comes time to enforcement. What you may again have happening is a lot of inequity in terms of the enforcement going there. There's the issue then I raised about the fixed penalty notices takes me to the issue of municipal police. Now, when the government issued the draft policy on local government, you know, they address a lot of things about municipal police. Again, I think the bill falls woefully short in really capitalizing on the potential for municipal police. I think I heard Senator Thompson-Ahye talk about a role for municipal police in terms of what we're seeing now on the front page every day about school violence. I would personally think that patrolling in areas, what used to be under the People's Partnership government called Community Comfort Patrol. I know they tried to revitalize it sometime during the state of emergency, and there was some, I think it lasted like 2 days or something like that, and then it went out the window because there was some issue with private contractors and who knows what. But the fact is, municipal police, if you are attached to, let's say, a corporation that has a, you know, again, large or dense residential areas, crime is something seriously affecting residential communities right now, as well as areas with a lot of agriculture. And we know that the Prairie Larceny unit is a little bit under-resourced and understaffed. Now, I heard the minister speaking recently, I think it was really last month, at a seminar somewhere, and he said that right now there are about 700 municipal police officers, and that by September we're getting 1,500. Okay, well, I would like to think that a seriously expanded role for those officers would be something that would very much serve, but you see, serve the interests of the people. But you see, the thing about it is that if you don't have integration between municipal police and your regular police officers, then you just kind of have no real strategy and direction in terms of dealing with crime and serious issues. So in its own policy document, the government talked about utilizing municipal police in order to deal with gang violence, and I saw some other things like that. What you have introduced here now is that the Public Services Commission and the Statutory Authority Services Commission will have to liaise with the Commissioner of Police to appoint municipal police officers. So we are hoping to more than double the amount, according to the minister in his public statements, double the amount of municipal police officers who are available, but you have even more hands stirring this pot of recruiting and appointing and so on. And you know, it's strange because I recall standing right here in this parliament where a motion was brought basically condemning service commissions and how inefficient they are and we can't get anything done. And I sit on so many different JSCs where service commissions appear before us and they say that, you know, they have vacancies for how many ever years and all of that. So again, where are these promises of bringing this service commission and that service commission and who is going? One is dealing with discipline. The commissioner of police will be giving directions. Somebody else has to consult with him in order to appoint. Added layers of bureaucracy in the appointment of municipal police rather than dealing with ways to utilize the resource to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is what local government is about. It's about people. It is about people feeling safe. It is about people feeling that they are paying their taxes and getting something in return right there on the street that they live on. And that wouldn't happen because of this bill in any way. Now, the issue of regulations, they said that the Public Service Commission and the Statutory Services Commission, I think they have to come together and make the regulations and so on. You know, I remember there was a case involving municipal police officers that went all the way to the Privy Council. And I think it's the first time I read a case where someone aptly, well, the law lords in London aptly described a lot of what happens in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly at the level of government. They said left hand didn't know what right hand was doing. or I think they said in this case, left hand knew that right hand wasn't doing anything and vice versa. No regulations had been properly made for municipal police officers, and the Privy Council held that was a breach of their right to protection of the law. By including 2 different service commissions here now to be involved in the regulation-making power under this act, what are we hoping to accomplish by that? What is the thinking? I searched through the minister's contribution. I didn't get it quite clearly. So I would like him to, if in his winding up, he could tell us what is the thinking behind having 2 service commissions involved in the issue of municipal police officers, because that's really the only substantial change we've seen here in this bill as it pertains to municipal police. So while we complain bitterly about service commissions and their inefficiencies, we are now burdening the municipal police with some of those inefficiencies. Mr. Vice President, more and more we are hearing people calling for the decentralization of power, not just at the local government level, but at all levels of government, and with respect to the rollout of services and so on. And I think that Senator Dillon-Remy, Senator Lyder, and a few others went through in many ways about the centralization of power in this bill with respect to the Minister of Finance. So I'm not going to repeat all of it. I have a list here as well, but I think Senator Dillon-Remy basically called out the same list that I have. I flag it because I say, again, when this magic bullet of local government reform is being sold from next week on our platform to campaign for local government elections due this year, we have to seriously ask ourselves, what is the outcome? When a minister is going to say who can get funding and donations, when a minister can now talk about the structures, and I want to point out in particular of concern to me were the amendments made to sections 37 and 38 of this bill. Mr. Vice President, I think that what we have done here is really placed the minister in a position where he's overshadowing the work and the decision-making processes that would have normally resided in independent public servants. And that is the short point. That's the short point. And I don't know that that could even in any way begin to give any comfort to a population that is unhappy with the type of with the delivery of services by the local government corporations, because you are now introducing that political element into local government delivery. So, for example, one of the clauses that caused me to raise my eyebrows was 37, the new 37.3, that notwithstanding subsection 1, and subsection 1 deals with the corporation and their functions, the delivery in respect of the matters set out in the 13th schedule, the minister, where he determines necessary in the public interest, take responsibility for delivery of services. So that would be the Minister of Local Government. And then you go down the road a little bit more, and you talk about the role of the CEO in section 38, and you say that you insert the executive council in what is subsection E. So it will now read that the chief executive officer is the chief administrative officer and chief accounting officer of the corporation, as I said, like the permanent secretary, and he shall, E, be responsible for, in collaboration with the executive council, the day-to-day operations of the corporation. You have politicians sitting with the PS, the equivalent of a PS, to run the day-to-day operations, and then you have a minister who can take control of any of the functions. That is not reform. That is a backward step in local government, in my respectful view, Mr. Vice President. Now, I don't think that having regard to how many speakers who have spoken on this bill so far, that is much more that I could add. I will just repeat what I said about real reform, starting with constitutional reform for local government and recognition of local government in our constitution. And again, I would like to see some clarification, perhaps provided by the winding up of this debate, on the thinking behind the involvement of more people in the process of municipal police, how is that going to progress the vision that the government says it has for municipal police and the role and function that they are supposed to play? And I would like to find out about the enforcement of property tax, where that is going to lie, how it is going to work, and what is going to be the relationship between the sharing of information now the other way around between the regional bodies and the Board of Inland Revenue, who has, in my respectful view and my reading of the law, and I stand to be corrected, has the responsibility to enforce the measures contained in the Property Tax Act. Because, you know, as difficult a time as it is for everybody in this country right now, we hear that the government continuously say that they are committed to implementing this property tax and imposing more taxes upon the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think the people of Trinidad and Tobago ought to be very clear as to which organs of the state would be dealing with every aspect of property tax implementation and enforcement, you know, for the sake of clarity and for them to understand what they are dealing with. The law ought to be clear and ought to be understood by all persons who are affected by it. With those few words, Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senate will be suspended for 45 minutes. We would resume at 2:20.